Mr. Mayor, we do not have a supplementary agenda this evening. And the rules for the council chambers. Rules of decorum at council meetings. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect for differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disrupts, disturbs, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in the removal of the premises. The use of postage, signage, and literature is also prohibited. Mr. Mayor, we have one conflict of interest, and that is Councillor Wright with regards to item 20E, the Waste Collection Contract 2024 amendment. And I would like to hand it over to Councillor Story now for the recognition.
Thank you, Judy. I'm honored to be here today to recognize the Chatham-Kent Public Library. Also with me in this recognition is Councillor Doyle, Councillor Allen, and Councillor Finn. We're all the council reps on the Chatham-Kent Library Board. And I've had the honor of working with the team at Chatham-Kent Public Library and seeing for the past year firsthand what incredible work they do and the pride and care that they invest in their roles. So it's even more rewarding to know that this work is being recognized on the provincial level. Just wanted to say hello, they're sitting behind me. Chatham-Kent Public Library has achieved a successful accreditation audit for all 11 branches under the guidance of a peer audit team from the Ontario Public Library Guidelines Monitoring and Accreditation Council. To achieve accreditation, auditors, public library peers from around the province reviewed 179 standards, measuring governance, access, partnerships, planning, personnel, collections, facilities, and many more aspects of library operations. Of the approximately 265 public library boards across Ontario and 45 First Nations public libraries, only 11%, that's 36 boards, 11% are currently accredited. With this audit, CKPL will enjoy accreditation status for the next 5 years. Achieving accreditation was an important strategic goal for CKPL to demonstrate its social value to the community. The accreditation process ensures that a library's services meet the highest standards, including offering accessible and inclusive spaces that are easy to navigate and allow everyone to feel welcome. And I know if you visited any of our library branches in Chatham-Kent, you know that they are very welcoming and inclusive spaces. To be successful, a library needs to regularly consult with the community it serves, as well as routinely coordinate with community partners to continue to improve services. This accreditation status confirms CKPL as a very strong service hub. The accreditation could not have happened without the commitment from the library board, and thanks to all the volunteers in the library board. The chair is here today, and we have lots of our library board folks here. Thank you very much for all you do and the time you contribute to our board. And all level of library staff, and thanks to them as well, working towards creating and maintaining an excellent public library system serving its community with 11 service points across Chatham-Kent. And may I also add that Tanya Sharp is our current chief librarian and has been so for 30 years, or been in the library system?
Been with the library system.
Thank you. And this Friday is her last day with the Chatham-Kent Public Library. She is retiring. And we are very sorry to see you go, Tanya, but you have left this remarkable library system in good hands. And I look forward to working with Heidi under her leadership, but can we all please recognize Tanya and her remarkable service to our community? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And now we move on to deputations. This evening, Council, you received an email at noon stating that there were 4 deputations this evening. 2 of them were just emailed in. So the first one is Bert Lampkin with regards to item 20G, the motion of Councillor Sakatri regarding the decorative crosswalk honoring veterans. And the second one is from Hydro 1 On item 18C, the motion of Councillor Jubenville regarding water wells along Hydro 1 St. Clair transmission line. We have two deputations this evening here present. The first one is Kelvin Simmons, followed by Kevin Jacobek, and both are on item 18C, the motion of Councillor Jubenville, water wells along Hydro 1 St. Clair transmission line. Welcome, gentlemen. You both will have 5 minutes to speak.
Judy, I apologize. Councillor Pinsino did want to say something regarding the recognition, and I apologize for going to him first.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I spent 16 years on that board and worked close with Tanya and all of her group there. They've done a fine job. And with the changing of the guards, I'm sure it's going to be good. Worked with Heidi those years too, and look forward to seeing where the library goes now. But I do know it's in good hands, and congratulations to all of you.
Thanks.
I will not repeat that. So I will call up Mr. Simmons now, and followed by Mr. Jacobek after. And the timer will be on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Kenneth and the council for letting me take time to speak today. My name is Kelvin Simmons. I'm a longtime resident of Ward 4 in Chatham-Kent. In August 2017, I became the 13th well owner at the time to report to the press that my water well was impacted by the construction of North Kent Wind Farm. My well water became polluted with sediment stirred up from the construction activities. My press story can be viewed on the Chatham Voice. I want to thank Councillor Jubenville for bringing up motion to council back in May of this year to ask Ontario Ministry of Health to continue the investigation that was started in the All Hazard Investigation 2021. I'd also want to thank Mayor Kenneth and council for sending a letter to Ontario Ministry of Health asking them to come back to Ward 4 to collect and analyze sediments that continue to affect so many of my neighbors' wells. It is extremely important that we know the levels of heavy metal in sediments and how much of a risk they are and how best to protect our health. That's something that we should be able to do in Canada. Our government should look at rural families just as much as city families. I'm here tonight to support Councillor Jubenville's motion. Thank you again. To ask council to send a letter to Hydro 1, asking Hydro 1 to conduct a baseline groundwater study for construction of the St. Clair transmission line. I live very close to the proposed route of Hydro 1 and they will use to construct the transmission line. From my personal experience, the experience of so many of us in Ward 4, the conclusion of all hazard investigation that our groundwater quality just deteriorated from 2017 to 2021. After construction of North Kent Wind tells us that the water wells are vulnerable and the aquifer is extremely sensitive to construction activities. Because we can continue to see sediment coming into our water wells, we need to take real measures to protect our aquifer or we risk losing them. We can do something. We can take measures to prevent that. Council sending a letter to Hydro 1 asked them to include a baseline groundwater study for St. Clair transmission line would be such a real measure. Ward 4 families have taken a beating. Too many of us have lost our wells. If Hydro 1 can do a baseline ground study, then all of us in Ward 4 will be able to see that the construction was different from wind farms. We'll be able to see if the transmission construction didn't cause or worsen the groundwater quality. We don't want to see any further degradation to our groundwater. It's for that reason I ask Mayor Kenneth and Council to support Ward 4 Councillor Jubenville's motion to send a letter to Hydro 1, ask them to include baseline groundwater study to St. Clair transmission line. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Jacobek, I understand that you have a video to also show, so we'll just have the timer in the background for you.
Mayor Kenneth, councillors, thank you for this opportunity to speak before you tonight. It's greatly appreciated. My name is Kevin Jacobek. I live in Ward 4 in the former Chatham Township of Chatham-Kent. I was recognized and invited by Hydro One, the things you get recognized for in life, I suppose. But I was invited by Hydro One to have ongoing meetings with your project manager and community relations manager to discuss the potential impact of the new St. Clair transmission line on the aquifer and water wells in Chatham-Kent. So I assembled a scientific advisory team consisting of experts with first-hand knowledge of the water well interferences that occurred after the construction of wind farms in Ward 4. Now, that advisory team consists of a hydrogeologist, a bedrock geologist, a well driller, and an academic researcher. The hydrologist is Bill Clark. Bill has been coming down to Ward 4 since 2016. He has been researching and trying to understand what is occurring to our water wells and why we're seeing this degradation in the water quality. The bedrock geologist is Terry Carter. Terry has published numerous studies on the Kettle Point Black Shale Formation. He is recognized by his peers as the preeminent expert of the Kettle Point Black Shale Formation in Ontario. The well driller is Johnny Wilson. Johnny comes from a long family of operating a water well drilling operation, but most importantly, he is also the first vice president of the Canadian National Groundwater Association. And the academic researcher is Dr. Joel Gagnon from the University of Windsor. Dr. Gagnon heads the Heavy Metals Laboratory at the Great Lakes Institute of Environmental Research. So all well-established experts who have first-hand knowledge of what's been happening in Ward 4. I want to show you, because we're short on time tonight, I want to show you the video that will describe and show you one of the construction techniques that Hydro One will employ in the construction of the St. Clair transmission line. And that's a technique called implosive splicing. And what that means is those cables will be joined together by the use of an explosive. So let me show you that video now.
Using a technique called implosive splicing on its transmission lines. It's a safe and reliable technique utilizing a sleeve containing a small, engineered implosive charge that is wrapped around another specifically designed metallic sleeve. Implosive connectors produce a smoother, stronger, and more electrically efficient connection that are virtually maintenance-free. The connectors can significantly reduce construction time and project costs because they can be installed in all weather conditions and on multiple structures at a time. Additionally, there are fewer environmental impacts associated with this type of splicing because longer sections of conductor can be strung from a single setup site. This requires less heavy equipment in the field and fewer access roads in remote and rural areas. Upon detonation, the charge creates an implosive compression, seamlessly joining the two conductor wire ends. The split-second detonation creates a loud boom that may be heard in the vicinity of the work.
Please note that. That's very significant.
At Dominion, we're committed to making sure our customers have the
So it clearly has advantages to the construction and getting the project underway. However, we had a meeting with Hydro One on September 21st where our expert advisory team advised Hydro One that in order to put the best interests of the residents of Ward 4 forward first, and with recognition of the pre-existing vulnerabilities that we've already had occur to us with a number of well interferences from the construction of the wind farms in the area, a recommendation was given to Hydro One to implement a baseline groundwater study. And what that means is to test the water wells before construction begins, test the water wells during construction, and test them after construction. Now, using baseline groundwater studies are a key method in protecting water resources. In fact, the North Kent Wind Farm also conducted a baseline study. That baseline study in 2017 was a precedent-setting study. That was the first time that a wind farm in Ontario had ever
Mr. Jacob, that's time.
conducted a study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we now have the consent agenda. I will read through the items that have been pulled on the agenda to speak about separate from the consent agenda. So item 15A has been pulled by Councillor Story with regards to the Chatham-Kent Administrator Group supply and delivery of gasoline and diesel fuels. Item 16A, changes to the Landlord Tenant Board Tribunal System. There is a presentation, and Councillor Story wishes to speak on that topic. 17A, Debt Management Strategy Update. There is a presentation, and Councillor Story. 17B, Purchasing Bylaw Revisions. There is a presentation by staff, and it's been pulled by Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Jubenville, and Councillor Doyle. Item 18A, the 2023 Special Events Update, has been pulled by Councillor Harrigan. Item 18C, the motion of Councillor Jubenville on water wells along Hydro 1 St. Clair transmission line, has been pulled by Councillor Jubenville, Councillor McGrail, and Councillor Brock McGregor. Item 19A, the Wheatley Task Force funding, Province of Ontario, has been pulled by Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Anderson. 19C, the motion of Councillor Jubenville regarding the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole, has been pulled by Councillor Jubenville, Councillor Harrigan, Councillor Sakachi, and Councillor Pinsino. Item 20A, the lease agreement with Chatham Minor Baseball Association, pulled by Councillor Jubenville and Councillor Doyle. Item 20B, the Municipal Cemetery Burial for People of Muslim Faith, has been pulled by Councillor Brock McGregor. 20C, Civic Center Water Damage, has been pulled by Councillor Story. 20E, the Waste Collection Contract 2024 Amendment, has been pulled by Councillor Wright due to a conflict of interest. Item 20F, the hours of operation of off-road vehicles, have been pulled by Councillor McGrail and Councillor Pinsino. Therefore, in one motion under consent, the following reports will be approved. 14A, B, C, D. Items 16B, 17C, 18B, 19B, and 20D and G.
We'll go online here, and Councillor Allen and Councillor C. McGregor, can you please move the consent agenda?
Happy to move it.
I just second.
With that, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor C. McGregor.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 15, tender awards.
15A, Chatham-Kent Administrator Group, CCLAG, supply and delivery of gasoline and diesel fuels.
Councillor Story and Councillor Thompson, can you move this, please?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Seconded. Councillor Story, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Edward, thanks for putting this report together for us. I just have a couple of questions. Is the $9.26 million amount higher or lower than previous years?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The 9.2 is based on our estimate of the number of volumes of diesel fuel and gasoline that we would use, and looking at the price that we got through the tender itself. So in terms of the amount of cost that we have in this contract, we are actually anticipating a lower cost through this contract than we would have had with our original contract that we had, the one that just expired.
Well, that's good news. Oh, man, there's a lot of excitement in the chambers tonight. Is a 4-year contract a standard time frame for a contract like this? Is 4-year listing?
Thank you, through the Mayor. We are doing this tender through joint procurement with the Chatham-Kent Lambton Administrator Group, which consists of municipalities of Chatham-Kent, Sarnia, St. Clair Township, and the County of Lambton. Our previous contract was 4 years with a 2-year extension, so this is common to get a longer term, more reliable cost in terms of the fuel that we're going to be purchasing.
Okay, that's great. Now, I see there in the report, you explain what the fixed costs are, but obviously we're all too familiar with the fact that fuel costs do escalate. So that 9.2 million is as an estimate / best guess for that 4-year period?
Thank you, through the mayor. In terms of the cost that's in there, it is based on a point in time. So if there's other external impacts, the war in Ukraine, COVID, that all impacted the cost that we paid for purchasing fuel. A couple of years ago it was $1.50. On this contract here, it's $1.30. So that may fluctuate through that time frame, but the contract as it's coming in right now is based on the current time frame, which was, I believe, September of this year.
Okay, thank you. Is the rack rate different? You mentioned the rack rate concept in the report as well, which is a new term for me. So what is that rack rate, and is it different in different locations? I know I've been doing some traveling the last couple of weeks, and our fuel rates here are actually significantly lower than where I was traveling the last couple of weeks. So how do we ensure that that rack rate remains low, or is that within our jurisdiction?
Thanks to the mayor, to the councillor. In terms of the rack rate, what the rack rate is really the price that the refineries sell to their clients. The clients could be municipalities such as ourselves, or could be to other distributors or retailers. Other major distributors have their gas stations. So we're buying essentially directly from the refineries, and it is comprised of a number of things. It's comprised of all the costs related to the fuel itself, transportation, overhead, profit, carbon taxes, and all those sort of things. And that could be different in different locations. So if you're, say, in Quebec, there's different taxes in Quebec than there's in Ontario. And also, one of the main drivers to the rack price is your distance to a refinery. We're fortunate, being in southwestern Ontario, there is refineries close by in Sarnia, so their transportation of that fuel is much lower than, say, having to send that fuel up to Montreal. So that's why you see a difference in potentially some of the prices in fuel in different locations within the province. We're fortunate enough that we have a supplier that's very close by.
Okay, thank you. And last question, from an overall perspective, are we looking at different ways that are, as a department, division, and as a corporation, to transition from some or all fossil fuel usage to more environmentally sustainable options?
Thank you to the mayor. In terms of, this is for our fuel usage in our existing vehicle fleet. Through our climate change adaptation plan, we are looking at different strategies. We do have quite a bit of vehicles that are things like pickups in our fleet that could be over time converted into something that's maybe powered by electricity, so electric vehicles is something you have to look at, but there is also other costs you have to consider. There's the cost of having mechanics that know how to work on those vehicles, having the infrastructure to actually deal with those vehicles themselves. So we'll be coming back to council, I would say, in the next year or so with our climate change action plan. And through that process, we'll be looking at how we can potentially convert our vehicle fleet to being more electric in the longer term.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councilor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Canna. Edward, my question is to you. With this contract, if we go over, will they extend the pricing to overage? Like, obviously, we've kind of estimated how much we'll need, but if we go over that need, will they extend the pricing to what we actually use? And are we committed to using that much? Like, what if we're under? Are we committed to using that much gas and diesel?
Thank you to the mayor. I believe there is minimums in the contract, but in terms of if we were to use more, we would just be getting that fuel at that cost. It is an estimate at this point. Our fuel usage does depend on how much we use the vehicles, and through COVID, we did see a decline at that time. But at the same time the price went up. So there is a bit of variability there, not only in our usage, but also in their fluctuation of price.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor C. McGregor
Yes.
and Councillor Allen.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Item 16, Health and Human Services.
16A, changes to the Landlord Tenant Board Tribunal System. We have a presentation from Douglas Kwan, Director of the Advocacy and Legal Services, the Advocacy Center for Tenants in Ontario.
Just going to, sorry. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Douglas Kwan. I'm from the Advocacy Center for Tenants Ontario, and we're a legal clinic that advances tenants' rights across the province. And one of the ways in which we do so is we provide self-represented tenants with legal advice at the Landlord Tenant Board. I'll quickly go over the background and issue slides so that we can begin to discuss solutions on the significant challenges facing the Landlord Tenant Board. Prior to the remote service model that we're currently experiencing, the Landlord Tenant Board used to operate 44 physical locations across the province. They did so including 8 regional centers, the closest one being in London. And each of these locations offer mediation staff. They were focused on hearing all types of applications being heard that day. They also focused on hearing matters that were matters that were located in that particular region or municipality. They also had access to tenant duty counsel as well. They offered, in some municipalities such as Windsor, offered eviction prevention programs, and they rented an office right next to the Landlord Tenant Board office. In Chatham, that location was the Wish Center. And it provided low barrier access for people because people in the community knew where the Wish Center were. And hearings were scheduled 3 times every month, and mediation staff attended those hearings. And that helped reduce the backlog and allowed parties to resolve matters. However, back in November 2020, that all changed with the remote service model that we're currently experiencing. What happened was all in-person services were removed. The regional centers were closed down. No counter service was being offered. Everything was moved to Zoom, which presented another barrier for people, this one being the digital divide. As well, all matters were scheduled by hearing type. And I'll get into that in a moment, but it would produce multiple hearing, it would require multiple hearings even for matters of the same address. And also provincial scheduling had impacted other communities that were not Toronto or Ottawa. So what are the current challenges at the board? I've defined them as access to justice, delays, and operational services at the board. So a little bit about the digital divide. In 2022, Deloitte produced a study where they found that 39% of households earning less than $40,000 per year failed to meet the minimum requirement of broadband that were necessary to participate. The median income of Ontario's renters are $58,800. And what we saw because of that with the remote service model were tenants participating in the hearings mostly by phone. 55.6% of tenants participate by phone, whereas 26% of landlords participate by phone. And therefore, the digital divide, as you can see, we're favoring one group over another. And to put it in other terms, if you were building a courthouse today, you wouldn't put a judge and one party in one room and then the other party in a separate room altogether. That's what we're seeing today. In May of this year, the Ombudsman reported on the problems at the Landlord and Tenant Board, saying that virtual hearings were chaotic, with participants struggling and sometimes failing to join their hearing or losing audio connection partway through. Adjudicators reported being unable to find and share documents on screen during hearings. And also the supports that we've been seeing over the last 3 years. This also supports what we've been seeing over the last 3 years, with people being kicked out of Zoom hearings, placed on mute and unable to tell their story. We had one tenant who participated on the phone and was thinking they were talking to a mediator, but in fact they were talking to their landlord and telling all of the details of how they arrived at the board. And the delays are well documented in the media. It's average delay for landlord applications is 7 to 9 months, for 10 applications up to 2 years, with some 10 applications going back to 2017 that have yet to be resolved. The pandemic also saw a significant reduction in applications. Sorry, let me just find my notes here. Sorry about that. The delays at the board are well documented, but it's not entirely linked to the pandemic. During the time of the pandemic, the board saw a significant reduction in applications for hearings, while the board increased its adjudicators to an unprecedented level. The roots of the delays are related to the digital hearings, scheduling matters provincially, and the inability of the board to schedule different types of applications in the same block. They also have numerous operational issues. I have a list here, but I don't want to go through all of them. But some of the changes that have occurred because of remote hearings is that you used to have a 3-page notice of hearing that clearly identified the location of your hearing and date and time of the hearing. Now it's 30 pages because they have to explain how to participate in digital hearings, which makes it even less accessible. Also, call times have doubled from 18 minutes to 37 minutes over the last 4 years, while the number of calls dropped by 40% at the Landlord and Tenant Board. The Ombudsman report in May found that the board has proven itself unequipped for the task of reducing its extraordinary backlog of applications, and that's fundamentally failing its role of providing swift justice with their landlord and tenant issues. And in their conclusion, they asked the Tribunals Ontario, the Ministry of the Attorney General, and the Landlord Tenant Board report back every 6 months to report on their progress. The barriers erected by the board has worsened the housing crisis across the province. Barriers to participation prevents tenants from telling their story. There are fewer opportunities for intervention prior to the eviction order from taking place. And as we know, every time we lose a sustainable tenancy that's affordable, and then that unit goes into the market, that affordable unit is lost forever. The board has taken some measures, though, to try and tackle the backlog. As I said before, they've hired an unprecedented number of adjudicators to try and tackle that backlog. They've introduced a mobile computer terminal program and a phone pilot. But I'm going to tell you that it's going to make very little impact because provincial scheduling is still taking place, where the dominant disputes are scheduled for Ottawa and Toronto addresses, which means that Chatham addresses are mixed with the Toronto and Ottawa addresses, and they are mixed with the Cornwall addresses, which are mixed with the Sudbury addresses in every day across the province. So you're less likely to have Chatham matters heard promptly. And they're also not being scheduled together. So you may have heard earlier this year there was a famous Airbnb case. And the occupant said, we're protected as tenants under the Residential Tenancies Act, and the landlord said, you don't apply. Well, the landlord filed an application, the tenant filed an application, and the sole issue was whether or not they're tenants. Both applications were scheduled at different dates with the possibility that 2 separate adjudicators could have a different finding. So that's one example of how they're not being heard together and causing more delays at the Landlord and Tenant Board. The digital divide has also prevented people having those hallway conversations from taking place. And so we all know the benefit of having in-person meetings. This is a full room council here today where you can have separate conversations. Unlike in Zoom where you have to wait for one person to finish talking before having a conversation. I can't highlight how important that was in terms of resolving matters so that it wouldn't go to merit hearings. It wouldn't increase the backlog. As I also mentioned earlier, there's an unprecedented number of adjudicators that really aren't going to tackle the issue. Back in 2010 and 2011, for example, there were 56 adjudicators at the board, and they were receiving 80,000 applications every year. That's their normal pre-pandemic caseload. And they were hearing scheduling matters in 5 to 26 weeks. Last year, the board had 81 adjudicators, but the delays were 7 to 8 months on average. This year, they have 115, and that's double, from the 2010 numbers, and we're still seeing significant delays. Now, on to some solutions that we're going to propose, and that's reflected in the letter that's also before council. We think that the Tribunals Ontario should return to Chatham, and here Chatham matters again. That will see those hallway conversations taking place. We'll see dedicated adjudicators who are familiar with the community, who know that, Chatham is not like Toronto. You have your own housing challenges. Adjudicators would be able to identify and met out proper justice because they knew the housing landscape. They were able to see the bad actors who appear before them and would adjudicate them appropriately. And Tenant Duty Council could then provide advice to every single person who needed their assistance. And also you would have mediation staff that were provided by the board who are there at every hearing location. Now in the virtual format, very few mediators are assigned those virtual hearing blocks, and even fewer approach them for help because they're just another black box on a screen. There's no level of trust where you can see, well, that mediator did a good job for that person who was sitting. I'm going to approach that person for telling me to find a resolution. So bring back in-person hearing as a viable option is key. Also, what's key is that it helps people when they know the area, they know where the Wish Center is. When you came here today, you knew that this building was at the end of King Street. You didn't have to ask anyone for assistance. It's just there. And also, you would have faster and fairer outcomes. Also, we're advocating for the recommendations of the Ombudsman to be adopted, all 61. And in the report of the Ombudsman, it's 97 pages, 61 recommendations. In that report, the Ombudsman says there are far more recommendations. There are more improvements to be done at virtually every level beyond the 61 recommendations. Also, that we should have a return to regional scheduling, reopen regional offices. We found that made a big difference, where people were able to say, did I fill out my form correctly, as opposed to finding out that they incorrectly filled out their form 8 months or 10 months down the road at the day of their hearing. And so these are some of the solutions that we've identified as an organization and that are reflected in the letter, and we hope that you support it. That is my presentation, and subject to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Douglas, for that presentation. That's a lot of information to process, and a lot of it is deeply disappointing, deeply disturbing to think about how many folks in our local communities and around Ontario are not having their needs met. We speak literally every council meeting about the critical issues we're facing in our housing sector. And the fact that this is also another barrier that we face, especially because a lot of these issues seem to be relatively easy to remediate, especially based on some of your suggestions. So it's definitely frustrating to hear that this is still an issue and it seems to be getting worse. So I have a couple of questions for you. Why did they stay with fully virtual sessions? Is it a cost benefit analysis? Because clearly the 100% virtual is not working. And I'm sure they've heard that more than a few times from their stakeholders, hopefully from us as well shortly. But why are they insisting that we have to remain virtual right now?
Thank you for your question, through you, Mr. Mayor. So when they announced they would go virtual, it was in September 2020, and then 2 months later they said we're going to make it permanent post-pandemic. I don't know the reasons for that, what findings that compelled them to take that approach. The provincial government does have a digital government strategy, which is laudable and it's great and it can work in some situations. But the Landlord Tenant Board is the busiest tribunal in the province. Primarily self-represented parties appear at the board. I was at the Ontario Land Tribunal, and at that hearing, everyone was represented by a lawyer. 23 matters were dealt with in half an hour. But that's far different than than the Landlord Tenant Board experience. So I can't say why they haven't changed, but I'm hoping with your support, they're going to look at that letter and they're going to reconsider that approach.
So that's what we can do as council. is to help advocate and lend our voices to that, to those requests. Is there anything we can do individually as residents of our communities to help move this forward?
I think supporting council's approach. There's an MPP. I believe the MPP is part of the as a government MPP that represents this riding, and so residential tenancies and the landlord tenant boards within their jurisdiction. So that's another way to advocate. It's really disheartening when you see situations where people are legally locked out. In Renfrew County, I've heard a story where someone was legally locked out in late summer. They had a hearing in September or October. It was adjourned, and they spent the winter months sleeping in ATMs and encampment sites before they had their hearing in April about whether or not they were legally locked out from their home. So we're seeing stories like that across the province. And really, when the board, because it's the only enforcement arm the province has to remind parties of their rights and responsibilities, when that's not functioning well, then we're seeing the side effects, outside our door in our community.
So people are literally becoming homeless. Like they're losing access
They
to their
lack
home.
the access to assert their rights. They, in the past, when hearings were heard, like, for example, I have this on the screen, Hamilton, it took 29 days. So before the last month's rent was up, you would get your hearing. And so the arrears wouldn't be so great. So the local rent bank could support that household. Sometimes that's all it takes, to cover a person's small arrears. But when you're waiting 6 to 9 months or 2 years for your hearing, rent banks can't support that level of arrears. Everyone falls on hard times from time to time, and when matters were heard properly and quickly, then we could bring those supports in to sustain those tenancies, but not with these types of delays.
I'm glad you mentioned the rent bank because there was an extended segment on that on local radio this morning. And this might be a Polly question too, but do we have a rent bank in Chatham-Kent? Not that that would necessarily solve this, but it did raise the question for me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor, we do. We used to call it a rent bank. It is actually our shelter solutions program so that if people run into problems, and that's where a lot of our funding from the housing prevention program goes.
Okay, thank you. It might be a Polly question too, but is there any room in our budget, for example, or any grants we can access, or perhaps this is a Gord question, could we play a bigger role? Could we hire temporary staff to assist more clients with accessing services? Is there any way that municipally we could reinstate the hearings at the Wish Center? Co-locate at one of our libraries? Is there anything more that we can do even just to make the local experience easier for our residents?
Thank you. If I could start that, I think that is part of what we're trying to do today is start this letter, but also there are, our workers in employment social services, our housing specialists are helping people with these. The libraries have setups where people can use space for free to go on Zoom calls. So do we, but I don't think there's anything that we can do that can replace a provincial service like this. It is a tribunal. So, in the letter we have offered to support the Landlord Tenant Tribunal finding space in our community. I would be committed to helping with that, but I don't know if anyone else wants to.
I think one thing I could add is it's important when municipalities are speaking because you are part of a larger organization, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And so, they take a strong advocacy positions on many matters. And when they hear their members who are concerned about this issue, or want to take a stronger stance on improving the board, I think that would help push the AMO to do the same, and also other municipalities as well. And so I think, I think this, by endorsing this letter, it will make a difference.
Thank you. And just one last question. Is this a human rights issue? I mean, this seems to be blatant discrimination and disregard for the rights of both landlords and tenants in lower income brackets. That's how it really seems to me. We live in this society with this, I think it's an almost criminally small and underfunded social housing sector. And I mean, the fact that folks who are lower income are the majority who are affected by this just seems to raise some other red flags for me.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing people fall through the cracks. At the Landlord Tenant Board, one of our tenant review council was helping someone from Etobicoke who needed bilingual services, who needed French language services. And the adjudicator staunchly denied that and asked the tenant review council, well, can you just interpret? And tenant review council said, well, that's not my job. My job is to help provide advice to this person. I'm not here to interpret. And it took about 20 minutes of back and forth before they decided, okay, well, maybe we should adjourn and have a French language hearing for you. So these, you know, this is happening almost every day where people aren't being permitted to fully participate. I want to recognize the legal clinic behind me, the Chatham Legal Clinic, and Jeff, who was brought to my attention. He was helping a tenant who couldn't participate digitally at her hearing and asked for an in-person hearing at the Wish Center. And the board said, well, you know, why can't they just go to London for their hearing? And, you know, I don't know who made that decision. I don't know if they've ever visited this part of Ontario. It's a 90-minute drive. And you're asking someone to take public transportation. If there is, I don't think there is any public transportation together. So the social service support worker just gave up and said, okay, well, we'll set up for you at our office. We'll spend the day helping you for your hearing. But that was an accommodation that the municipality was providing to try to bridge that gap. And as Polly had said, that's not your role. Like that's the landlord tenant board's role to provide access to services for your constituents.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned Jeff Wilkins, who is here. I've learned a lot from Jeff over the last couple of years. He is a staunch advocate for so many people in our community. I'm really glad to see him, and also thanks to Polly. And thank you, Douglas, for your presentation.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'll move that recommendation as well. Did want to thank you for the presentation, and I know it seems like we're discussing homelessness and housing insecurity almost every meeting, which I think is appropriate in the current environment. I also think that it's not a surprise to any of us that provincially centralizing a service puts smaller communities at a disadvantage. So, you know, this is something that I think that we're all going to support, and we really do need to pull every lever we can when we're trying to deal with these issues. And unfortunately, it does seem like when these systems are broken, it puts added stress on services that we provide municipally. So at the end of the day, it is municipalities that bear the brunt of some of these challenges, and I hope that this letter falls on ears that will listen, and that other municipalities and associations will be saying the same that we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sakachi?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and through you to the presenter. I appreciate how detailed you were in regards to being in tune to this conversation. Obviously, it's a really important issue, and I've had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Wilkins a couple times, and he's extremely helpful. One just quick, not really a question, but I just wanted to, something that I'm concerned of a little bit is that in relation to the direct raise in interest for one, and mortgage rates, as well as the potential significant rates increase in property taxes around there. I'm just curious to see, like, with the potential increase of 2.5%, I think it is in 2024, that people can raise their rent. What do you think is going to happen? I know this is subjective to some landlords who maybe are the good landlords who have people at a decent rent that now are going to be challenged to even pay for their properties with the increase of the mortgage rates, tax rates, and what do you think that's then going to do to the market? I'm guessing that's going to probably have significant impacts to people who are already struggling to pay their rent.
Thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, I think with this issue, the Landlord Tenant Board, it's one issue that both landlords and tenants can agree. It needs to be fixed. And the delays, what we're seeing is that the increase in short-term rentals, how units that were used to be available for long-term renters are being pulled from the market and instead are becoming short-term rentals because people can't trust the landlord-tenant board to adjudicate their matters. And so, as I said earlier, it's the only place to enforce the rights and responsibilities of all the parties. And when that's not functioning, then everyone suffers. And I spoke mostly from the tenant side because the digital divide is impacting the majority of tenants, but certainly it does impact landlords as well, and I recognize that.
Yeah, thank you. And your comment you kind of hit the nail right on the head when it comes to the time associated with it. Definitely not all landlords are bad and not all tenants are. There's a mix out there. The challenge is that if you are in a situation where you're being, challenged from a financial standpoint, if it's taking 12, 13, 14 months, that's enough for some people to potentially lose their properties. And that's another rental house off the market, which then just snowballs into the effect of the demand. And once the demand increases, so does the cost. And it's just a really, unfortunate turn of events. So I really appreciate the presentation today. Thank you.
Councillor Story, can I second that, please?
Happy to second. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor C. McGregor. Councillor C. McGregor, are you there?
Okay,
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0.
Item 17, Finance Budget Information Technology and Transformation.
17A, Debt Management Strategy Update. We have a presentation by Gord Quinton, the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to talk to you for a few minutes on how strategic use of debt can help Finance Council's strategic plan. So this is my alternate title, and I've cleaned this one up as well. Debt, a very bad four-letter word. In our personal lives, debt really often is perhaps a bad thing. Of course, we'd rather have the cash to be able to pay for things, but if we think on an operating and capital basis with limited funds in your weekly paycheck, you look to pay for operating expenses such as transportation, groceries, rent, and utilities without the use of debt, and you're judicious on when debt is appropriate for large capital items, such as perhaps as a car loan or a house mortgage. The house mortgage looks at a very long time horizon, often 25 years or more, and you made the decision that you could afford a certain monthly payment in addition to those general operating costs, and that so that you're able to buy that house or a car. So near the end of your planned working years, the house is often fully paid for, hopefully, lowering your operating costs in your senior years when you no longer have employment income. So that makes very much sense to an individual. But however, a municipality is not the same as a person. A municipality does not have a limited lifespan that a person has. Both the expenses of operating a municipality and the income from both upper governments, ratepayers, and taxpayers are in a permanent state. Therefore, although we often explain new issues of debt in terms of a house mortgage for public to understand, it's not about a one-time major debt and then done. It's really about a series of debt over time. So why would a municipality ever issue debt? And the answer is intergenerational equity. So, excuse me, moving too fast here. If we did add a new major facility or a piece of infrastructure that never existed before, and we need to come up a large amount of money to fund it, it makes perfect sense to spread that cost over a period of time and perhaps over several or over multiple generations. The infrastructure will last for more than one generation, so the building cost should be matched with the users over a long period of time. So historical examples of this in Chatham-Kent are for building major water and wastewater plants, new facilities such as Riverview Gardens Long-Term Care Home, Riverview Terrace Housing, the John D. Bradley Convention Center, examples of what we bored for in the past. In all these cases, the users would use the facility for over 50+ years, and it made perfect sense to not have just the current taxpayer or ratepayer fund it all up front. So where's it not appropriate for a municipality to use debt? And the answer is replacing existing infrastructure. So in Chatham-Kent, in the beginning of our days, we did use some debt for replacing existing infrastructure because we had no funding in place at all for our asset management plan. But over the years, we built up our asset management plan funding, and we've adopted a pay-as-you-go philosophy for our road, bridges, and linear infrastructure, and to maintain our existing assets. When a bridge needs a major upgrade or replacement, we fund those through our annual life cycle asset management plan budget. And this is where Chatham-Kent might be different than some municipalities. We don't just have one bridge that is replaced every 75 years, but we have 850 bridges or so that are, and we replace 15 to 25 of those a year. And it means that we can actually save a lot of interest and tax money by not debt financing, but having a smooth annual income stream to fund these consistent rebuilds. This most effectively uses taxpayers' funds without adding a premium for the next generation to pay. And for a second, I'd like to talk about Chatham-Kent's balance sheet. It is in excellent condition right now. At the November 6th council meeting, council received our 2022 audited financial statements. And a couple of facts presented that our net financial position, which is our assets exceeding liabilities, was $274 million. Our tax-based debt was only $7.8 million remaining. And we had reserves of $278 million, including infrastructure-related reserves. In this chart shows our outstanding tax-funded debt. And you can see at the end of 2023, we're down below around $6 million. And by the end of this council's term, will be around $3 million of tax-funded debt outstanding. So we're approaching zero here very fast. Technically, Chatham-Kent is allowed by the provincial government, by their annual debt limit calculations, to have up to $700 million of debt based on our size and ability to pay. There are municipalities that are at their debt limit. We're at 0.01% of our debt limit here in Chatham-Kent. I've copied from the debt strategy report to council that accompanies this presentation tonight, the council terms priorities section to really highlight how debt directly ties into your strategic plan. And I urge council to really think about how debt may be a key tool for generational projects that are coming up in the rest of your term. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers at the bottom, but on your desk, thanks to Eric and communications team tonight, but on your desktops, you do have the updated council term priorities. And I urge you to not only look at it tonight, but for the rest of this week as we go through our budget deliberation. I would urge council to think strategically of when debt may be appropriate through the rest of the term, or at least in the planning of projects or use of debt when built next term. So some of these projects take multiple years to plan and build, so you might be planning this term for what we might be issuing debt next term. As I said, the key was the development of your council's strategic plan. The multi-year budget, the asset management plan, the long-term financial plan, and the debt strategy are all integrally related to the strategic plan. On this slide, I'm giving some potential examples of where the municipality may plan to use debt in the coming term or into the next term. So I've asked the Public Utilities Commission to give their top three there, and the Wallsburg water plant, the Blenheim to Ridgetown main line, and the Chatham water plant storage capacity projects. Them alone, the PUC may be issuing up to $140 million of debt just for those three items within the next 5 years. For the municipal items, we clearly do not have any firm commitments from council on any of these right now, but multi-use recreational facility, advancing affordable housing even more, downtown redevelopments, or any major new infrastructure that you can that we not replacing what we have now, but investing in new infrastructure may be issues that council wants to think through their strategic plan and guide staff into bringing back reports over the next couple of years on how to finance those issues. And the last category is growth. Growth items could be expansion of industrial or commercial areas, or putting in arterial roads ahead of a residential development. Some of those projects may be funded. Funding might not be from the tax base, but maybe from developers or development charges. But example of that, what can be as simple as removing stoplights and putting in stop signs and putting in stoplights at an intersection, such as what we did at McNaughton and Kyle just a few years ago. Or it could be widening a road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, or development-related things. It's not the taxpayer that's paying it, it's the growth that's coming from those areas that will pay for it over time. So all summed up, we could be issuing upwards of $300 million of debt over this term and the next term of council. But the key is how much tax dollars funded. How much of that would be tax dollar funded, and what other sources of funding are in the mix? Whether rate funding, upper level funding, I think that's key on some of those categories, or developer funding. The tax funded portion may only be a sliver of this all this debt once if we plan well and ahead and have our partners pay their fair share. So in conclusion, professional advice of the treasurer, council should consider debt as an option for generational new projects. And on tonight's agenda is just an update of, we've had a debt policy in place since 2015. It's simply an update of that policy that's on your agenda tonight, but I more importantly want to give my opinion here tonight. So I'll open that, pass it back to you, Mayor, for questions.
Councillor Hare, or Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Harrigan, can you put this on the floor, please?
I'll put it on the floor.
I'll second.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thank you, Gord, for the presentation. I found this very helpful to read through this, and really puts a lot of this into perspective, because we've had a lot of discussions so far in the past council year about what we're looking at, and I know you put 9 different bullet points up there, and I know there's more that we've talked about, so thanks for explaining that in more detail for us. A few things that came to mind for me when I was reading this. When I was in Ottawa for FCM this week, one of the activities we did is we watched the fall economic statement together, which, believe it or not, is more entertaining than it sounds. But one of the issues that came out of that announcement were concerns about the debt charges and the cost of borrowing, and that right now the cost of government borrowing seems to be ballooning. So as we consider taking on more debt ourselves, is that something we should be concerned about from a municipal government debt perspective?
Thank you, through the mayor. So you always have to look at the long-term over multiple years, what the payments are and what's the most affordable option. Of course, the federal and provincial governments went into a lot of debt, extra, more than they ever planned through the pandemic. And some of that was to fund municipalities to help them through the pandemic as well. Provincial and federal governments can also run deficits and debt fund. Our budgets have to be balanced. But for capital projects, it is an option for council to consider, particularly the new things that are generational projects. And but when something comes forward, we would bring a detailed financial plan with recommendations on how far that debt should go forward. Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? What makes the most sense for an individual project, depending on the size of the debt and ability to pay. And it's about evening the cost of capital for these major projects over time and potentially over generations, so that it's not all on the current taxpayer to build something that lasts for decades.
Okay, thank you. To piggyback onto that, so if we entered into a debenture or additional debt, let's say this year, would we be locking in interest rates and costs that are in effect in 2023, for example?
That's a good question. So you know, we've gone from a couple of years ago, the municipality could have borrowed for around just over 2%. Now it's between 5 and 6% for a 20-year debenture. We're always planning ahead, or should be planning ahead, and so to be fair, there was no major generational projects voted on to proceed with by council a few years ago when we could have borrowed at very low, historically low prices. But even projects that you may be deciding upon the rest of your term of council, they're likely 2, 3, 4-year projects to build. And so we have enough cash flow in our bank accounts now. We would try to time that to our advantage, and with the projected, the current Bank of Canada projections of inflation moving down, we do expect interest rates to start to fall sometime in 2024, and in 26 or 7, when you might need these funds, maybe we're back down below 4%. Okay. And by the way, 4%, anything under 5% historically is excellent. Chatham-Kent amalgamation took on some debt at the 12 and 14 and 15% rates. So
yeah, I know my parents talking about the early 80s and the rates that were underway then. I'm just reading from your report too. Would you mind commenting about, we must give consideration to the increased debt servicing cost or new initiatives which translate to approximately 30+% increase in project costs. Can you explain a little more about what that means, just so we're aware of it?
Yeah, so of course, taking on debt adds to the cost. You have to now pay the interest, and depending on the length of term and the interest rate, that could be 30, 40% more that you're going to pay over time. I think what's also equally important is to look at the rates of inflation on capital projects. And the price of some of these capital projects are I would say the inflation rate is still very much outpacing sometimes the debt costs. So if it's about, and really it's in council's hand to plan these at the appropriate times when the community needs it. If I used the example of a twin pad arena, for example, where this horseshoe has debated arenas for over 2 decades now, $25 million projects become $50 million projects, become $75 million projects. And perhaps, so you always have to compare how much the inflation is going up compared to that interest rate. Yes, it's going to cost you more to borrow money and repay it back over time, but that still can be the best decision to make. But it's also ultimately council's decision when these projects move forward.
Right, we're balancing a variety of factors there. I appreciate that. The $140 million in debt for the PUC, now, is that administered the same way as another debenture would be if we did a multi-use, a twin pad arena or something like that, or is that something separate? I mean, there's always still one taxpayer in the end, but is that assessed differently?
Financial services, we look after that on their PUC behalf. PUC can't borrow debt, but they ask the municipality to borrow debt on their behalf. The difference there is the payments are paid back through rates, whether it's water or sewer rates, depending on the project. So it has no impact at all on property taxes.
Okay.
I get, in the end, there's property owners that if they're connected to water or sewer rates, it's all part of the item. But, some of that, by the way, some of that borrowing, should point out the $140 million that the PUC plans to borrow, they also have development charges that are paying for the growth portion of that debt over the next 20 years. So it's not all coming out of water or sewer rates.
So there might be other ways to mitigate that.
Yeah.
That's great. One final question. I really appreciate how critical this discussion is, and it's a great opportunity for us to work together as a council to implement our strategic plan, and we do have them printed out on our desks here, which is very handy to see. So when, maybe this is a Michael question, but when are we talking about this together at council in terms of how we line this up with our strategic plan, or is this going to be more of a ongoing, I mean, it will be an ongoing discussion, but I'd love to see us make time for this, because this is, as you said, a multi-generational discussion, and how we decide our funding envelopes for this term will affect council terms and our community for decades to come. So, any insight on that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. You're right, it's ongoing. So, we wanted to have this discussion beforehand. There will be some items that we expect will come forward. Mr. Soldo and his team have explained that there's a couple of master plans that they're working on, and I think that master plans need to be a precondition to some of these broader discussions. So I anticipate in the next 12 to 18 months, if not sooner, some of them will come forward, and they won't all come at different times. And the other thing is some of them aren't necessarily driven by the municipality. Sometimes it's a developer comes forward with an application, and as a result, there may be servicing costs that we have to explore. So there's no set time. These will come forward as they're, as they have the background information that we need in order to, make recommendations about them. So, but I agree with Mr. Quinton. I think that, given the council strategic priorities and where we're at with growth in the community, I think we all kind of want to see interest rates go down a little bit first, and a better handle on cost of living and inflation. But I do think you'll start seeing some of those things come forward over the next, as I said, 12 to 18 months.
Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Through the mayor, thank you, Gord, for your presentation. Something that you highlighted and that's highlighted in the policy is this concept of replacing existing infrastructure not being an acceptable use of debt. But sometimes on council, we've seen where the infrastructure that we have is not adequate enough for the residents who are existing, and that infrastructure is also preventing growth. So I'll point to an area in my corner of the neighborhood, Tilbury Stormwater Sewer Plant. So we've had proposals that have come to council, and in order to say yes to 2 or 3 new houses, we've had to ask developers or builders to build their own storm sewers, basically, or storm sewer infrastructure to enable that growth to happen. So certainly that is a hindrance on growth, which then it just becomes this vicious cycle. So could there be potential reasonings for leveraging debenture to replace existing assets? And is that something we're considering, I guess to Edward, also in our asset management plan?
Thank you through the mayor. And yes, I will ask Edward to join in at the end of what I'm saying as well. But, when I talk about like assets, replacing a asset that's just at the end of its life with the same diameter pipe or same asset, we really should be paying that as a pay-you-go basis. But if you're discussing taking out, for example, an 8-inch pipe and putting in a 20-inch pipe, because that's how, whether it's based on climate change or whatever purpose, there may be arguments to be made that debt financing is appropriate for some part, at least a portion of that asset that's going to last for the next 75 years and provide benefits to the next few generations. So, I think specifically to Tilbury, there is quite a series of projects that need to be completed over time. Edward would have more ideas on the timeline, but for example, if that's a 20-year plan based on current pay-as-you-go methods, there may be opportunities to shorten that, but you still have to work in designing, engineering. Part A has to happen before Part B, and there's a series of events it's not to say that you could cut the time in half, but there may be ways to speed that up. But you'd also have to put in place the resources, both on engineering team and other consultants and even the contractors to be able to get it done in a condensed timeline. Edward, anything to add?
Thank you, through Mayor. I can't add anything better than that. Treasurer did a really good job. There is some aspects of that project, like the upgrades, that I would consider for debt financing. There's a lot of new aspects of that job as well, the new ponds that are potentially partially funded through DCs as well. So just the magnitude of those projects are so large that if we leave it to our capital budget, we're going to take that timeline to be a lot longer than say if we debt finance in the shorter term. So we can implement the stormwater management solution in Tilbury over 20 years, or we can implement it over 10 years. And that's really where that debt financing comes in to play and really plays an important part.
And just one follow-up question, Mayor Caniff, if I may. So when you think about some of the new infrastructure that the community has used debt before to finance, like the Bradley Center as an example, or when you think of large buildings or large areas, RVG, where really there's a good argument to say all of Chatham-Kent benefits by having the Bradley Center here. There's also some things, again, I'll point to Tilbury Stormwater, where yes, all of Chatham-Kent can inherently benefit because of the growth and the increased tax revenue. But then today's homeowners and today's residents are maybe benefiting a little bit more than in a different corner of the community. Is there space in our conversations for area ratings and debentures to go hand in hand? Or does that start to take us down a path of, myself and Councillor Thompson fighting about who's getting what in the debt management plan? I just picked one person across from me.
Absolutely, we'd like to see you duke it out in the ring here. So yes, the door is open, always open to have those discussions, whether it's a area rated charge or sometimes it's a fee, maybe not on a tax bill, maybe it's on the water and wastewater bill. There's lots of options to look at, and ultimately what's in the general benefit for all citizens of Chatham-Kent that should be paid for by everyone. So it is a discussion that we could have once we get talking about specific projects.
Great, thank you. And very much looking forward to having those conversations at the right time as we work through those asset management plan requirements.
Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, and my question has been answered.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. No question, Gord. I just wanted to take a quick second to recognize yourself. We're always talking about municipal assets, in those types of very difficult conversations. But I think sometimes one of our biggest municipal assets that we forget to mention is our staff. And I think that you've done a very exceptional job over the 5 years I've been here, navigating through some very difficult times. I know we have a lot of tough times coming up here, in budget and all that, but I do recognize that yourself and staff and the decades that you put here has put us in a financial situation that we can look at borrowing some money to better our community. And then just another statement to just wanted to make is it not possible, because we do have very healthy reserves, to actually just borrow money from ourselves, and especially with some of the CIPs that are coming to maturity in the next 5 to 10 years, that we could even accelerate the payment process to ourselves when those start to mature?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The CIP is an excellent point, particularly when I say a lot of these construction projects that you may be looking at over the next few years will take a couple years to plan and then a couple of years to construct. So you may be talking 2028 before you're actually, we could absorb the interim payments and the construction costs internally, but maybe it is a long time down the road before we're actually borrowing for the project, which might coincide with some CIP grants dropping off and us getting them.
I'm really looking forward to Edward's recreational master plan, because I have a feeling that there's going to be some other difficult conversations coming up in the past in regards to how we potentially invest in our community. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor C. McGregor
Yes.
and Councillor Allen.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 17B, purchasing bylaw revisions. We have a presentation by Jennifer Sherrill, the Manager of Purchasing and Accounts Payable.
I apologize. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm here tonight to discuss the purchasing bylaw changes. What brought us here? You may recall back in the spring, a tender was issued for grass contract. A high number of non-compliant bids were received. In April, a notice of motion was passed. I'm here to address that notice of motion and to present some proposed bylaw changes. The notice of motion was broken into 4 separate items. I will address each of those items, and then on future slides, I will provide more information on those proposed changes. Notice of motion 1. Produce a summary of processes that are in place or could be added to address submission of non-compliant bids. Our proposed changes include change the bid security requirement and hold mandatory site meetings. The existing processes include a feature in bids and tenders called Ask a Question, where contractors can ask a question, seek clarification, or ask for help in submitting their bids. Also, bids and tenders software itself is a control feature to help to stop non-compliant bids. A contractor can't submit an incomplete bid, nor can they submit a late bid. Prior to implementing this software, those were both common reasons for non-compliance. Notice of motion 2, review process and/or documentation to reduce the number of non-compliant bids. Produce helpful documentation for bidders to avoid common pitfalls that can result in non-compliant bids. To be included in tenders where any significant non-compliance has been noticed in a previously released tender. In our review, it was noted that the most common reason that a bid is rejected now is because of a wrong tender bid deposit. To address this issue, it is proposed that a mandatory bid meeting be held on certain projects. The proposed resolution for notice of motion item 1 and 2 are very similar. Change the deposit amount and implement mandatory bid meetings. First, we propose to change the bid deposit from a percentage, requiring a contractor to calculate that deposit amount, to a set dollar amount. Currently, a bid deposit of 10% of the total contract price is required. Errors occur when calculating that value, and there's confusion on whether the total contract price includes HST or not. And in alliance with tendering law, those bids have to be rejected. By changing the bid security to a set dollar amount, contractors, the confusion will be reduced by contractors as well as their errors. The set deposit amount would roughly be 10% of a project estimate. And there are other municipalities that are currently using this method. Proposed revision mandatory site meetings. When the documentation and processes were reviewed, it was felt that the bid documents contained all of the information needed for a contractor to submit a compliant bid. We felt that if a contractor wasn't understanding the bid documents and the requirements, then they wouldn't, another supplementary document wouldn't be of value to them. If a contractor didn't read the specified requirements in the bid document, then they wouldn't likely read a supplementary document. We think that holding a mandatory bid meeting in which bid processes, deposit requirements, specifications, etc. could be explained would be a better service to the contractors. The contractors would also be able to ask questions and seek clarification. Notice of motion 3. Review of how projects are managed. Provide options for council on implementing more active contract assessment and/or management approaches, including costing. The investigation of full active contract management will take more time to complete. We decided to come back to council with recommendations for the other 3 items, and we'll report back later on the active contract management. Notice of motion 4. A review of other municipal bylaws or other government purchasing approaches to determine if there are any process changes or best practices that can be implemented in Chatham-Kent to reduce non-compliant bids, including considering any adjustments that can be made to minor irregularities that can be corrected by bidders. Minor irregularities that are allowed are noted in Schedule B of the bylaw. Unfortunately, the irregularities noted in the GRAS submissions were major and were not correctable. Legal undertook the review of other municipal bylaws. They found the irregularities in Chatham-Kent's bylaw were in line with the other municipalities, and therefore they are recommending that there be no changes. I would like to address specifically the GRAS tender. 5 bids were rejected as non-compliant. 2 companies didn't bid all the parcels in a package. 2 companies submitted insufficient deposit, and another company submitted a deposit in an unacceptable form. This slide demonstrates what happened in the GRAS tender and what the expectation would be if the proposed changes were implemented. As previously noted, all 3 items had to be rejected. But with the proposed bylaw and process changes, the expectation would be that the contractors that had been rejected would now submit a compliant bid. The issue 1, not all items in the parcel bid, the contractor would understand the process and expectations through the bid meeting and the training that is offered at that meeting. The insufficient bid deposit would be addressed by the specified deposit amount and the clarification of the process in the bid meeting. Through the bid meeting, the unacceptable deposit form would be clarified. Other proposed changes. While reviewing the bid processes and the bylaw to address the notice of motion, a full bylaw review was undertaken. A survey of both internal staff and external municipalities was completed. A review of several other municipal bylaws was also completed, and we held meetings with internal staff to provide their feedback. The result of that review are the following 3 proposed areas of change: approval authority, professional services roster, reduced contract security.
Approval authority benchmarks. The information in this table was obtained through the survey and the review of the other municipalities' bylaws. When council approval is required, varies widely from one municipality to another. On the low end, $75,000, to a high end of unlimited, where only the exceptions go to council. Approval authority reports to council. When an approval report comes to council and it has followed the proper purchasing policy procedures and is in line with the bylaw, meaning that there are no exceptions, then council only has two options. They can approve the project or they can cancel the project. If the proposed changes to the approval authority had been in place in 2021, 123 fewer reports would have come to council where the only option was to approve or cancel. With that in mind, these are the proposed changes being recommended. Proposed revision of approval authority. The first three levels were recommending no change. Those levels were adjusted in 2020. The proposed changes are for any purchase over $100,000. If a project has an approved project budget, the project was approved through the budget process and specific dollars were attached to that project, it is proposed that council would approve those projects only over $1 million. This would reduce the number of reports coming to council where the only option for council is to approve or cancel that project. The City of London is currently using this methodology, but their limit is $3 million. A project without an approved budget at $100,000 would require council approval. We are also proposing that direct appointment of professional services be reduced to $50,000 and a professional services roster be implemented. Proposed revisions, professional services roster. Currently, professional services can be directly appointed up to $75,000. A consultant can be just given work up to $75,000. It was our opinion that this level was high to be giving work away without any procurement process. A professional services roster would require an RFP to be issued. Companies would submit, they'd be evaluated on their ability, experience, staff, etc., and cost. There would be various categories to those rosters. The various rosters would require council approval. The successful companies would be ranked and assigned work up to $150,000 as needed. The roster would have to be reissued every 3 years or less. When reviewing the bylaw and looking for ways to save money on projects, it was noted that Chatham-Kent requires 100% performance bond and a 100% labor and materials bond on any project over $100,000. While other municipalities only require a 50% performance bond and a 50% labor and materials bond. Reducing the bonding requirement could reduce the contract costs, but it could increase the risk. The proposed wording in the bylaw allows for flexibility when a project is of low risk to be able to reduce the bonding requirement and potentially reduce the project cost. Earlier today, it was noted that we needed a clarification to section 39A and 39B. The sections previously noted are just for a tender. They only speak to a tender, and we needed to adjust that to speak to both a tender and a request for proposal. So the bolded section are what is recommending to be changed. So we want to remove lowest compliant response, and which would apply to a tender, and replace it with a successful response. So whether it's a tender or an RFP, the clause would apply as a request for proposal is awarded on the highest score, not the lowest. And then likewise 39B, just add in some wording to clarify that the lowest compliant response to a tender or the highest scoring response to a request for proposal. And those are the proposed changes to the bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Doyle, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to put it on the floor, Mayor Caniff.
I will second that.
Okay, questions from Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Doyle, and Councillor Jubenville. So Councillor Sakachi?
First and foremost, for someone who doesn't regularly present at council, you did a very good job. It was very, oftentimes when you make, a notice of motion and they come back, there's some certain things that you would like to maybe see a little bit differently or defer it back for a future, consideration. But I must say that this literally checked off every single box that I had concern with when I sent it to staff for as a notice of motion. Going to keep my comments relatively short. Besides the fact that I wanted to recognize you folks in your department did a very, very good job. The first one is that do you feel that this exercise for your team was also very beneficial? Because I do think it was very beneficial for the public, and I think the more compliant bids you get, the better it is for cost feasibility for our community as well. So we don't miss out on maybe some more cost savings with people that had a non-compliant bid just on a small clerical error.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, our team did learn a lot through the process. Thinking we wanted to take our bylaw in a different direction, but then when reviewing other municipal bylaws, opened our eyes to what others are doing and trying to incorporate some of that into our bylaw. So it was definitely a good exercise.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you because, like I said, I think that we've made some significant improvements in the process. One quick question I would have to Gord is in regards to the approval when it comes to an approved project budget. So how I understand this properly, and if I'm wrong, you're good at correcting me. So basically, we would have a number that you would bring to council that you would be estimating that a certain RFP would be coming in at, and then we would basically be approving you for a certain amount. And as long as it didn't exceed that amount, then the executive management team would be able to approve that if it came back within the amounts to council. So we would have an eye on it first if it was a large ask, and then basically if it came in that budget request, then you would just be rubber stamping it instead of it coming back to council as long as it's within those parameters, correct?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yes, that's correct. And in the upcoming budget that we're looking at all week, and specifically also in the capital budget, which had the next several years of expected projects. Well, I'm going to back up there because technically you're only approving the 2024 budget and the 2024 projects. But any of those capital projects on the 2024 list, if it's being approved for $800,000 and the bid comes in at $790,000, there would be no need for it to come back. It would just there would still be an internal process of approvals happening, but it wouldn't have to come back to the council floor. And I think sometimes council is finding that you're actually voting on the same issues 2, 3, 4 times because you've sometimes approved the project during a budget process, then it had to come back for the consultant, and then it had to come back for the tender, and perhaps there's a land purchase in there too. So you're seeing projects multiple times where really you should be focusing back on my previous discussion, your strategic plan and your strategic directions, and on the next things you want to do, and not, I wouldn't say wasting time, but when tenders come to you and the only choice is to approve or cancel the project altogether, that canceling just never happens. And so it's 123 reports in the last 3 years that you really didn't need to see.
Thank you. My last just comment too is I also think it's important to recognize that projects 10 years ago, that would have been $250,000. And the cost that they are now, even though they're the same project, because of the cost associated with, the economics of construction has significantly changed. So now, just that solidification that we're going to see the budget request still know what that project's going to be worth. Happy to support this. And once again, I really think that this is significantly beneficial for our local contractors when it comes to small bids that potentially missed out just on, like I said, some small errors. So very good job to your team, anybody that participated in the report. Thank you.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to say thank you very much for this report. It should take care of a lot of the issues that we had, hopefully, and get us some more bids and hopefully get our costs down for some of the items that we're doing. So most of my questions were answered already, but just one, as Gord said, that brought me another one. So just curious, of the 123 that reports that we technically didn't really need to see, was there any of those that changed or stopped?
Jennifer, I'll have you help me if you know of any, but I think my answer is 0. Yeah, the council approved every one of them.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Juvenville.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Just a quick question, and again, I echo everyone's comments. That was an excellent report, very clear, and I appreciate the work you and your team did to address some of the concerns that were raised with us earlier in the year. The professional roster, who is deciding who, you'll do an RF or a call for proposals for professionals to join that roster. How are we deciding who gets selected for that? Is it one, you mentioned, I think, doctors, lawyers, and dentists, or something, if I read that correctly. How would we decide, if we have no dentists on staff, how are we deciding who joins that roster?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those were just examples. It would be our consulting engineers, it could be architects, and the departments that are responsible for that, Edwards area, would be the ones developing that. They are very well-versed in that program, that process. They're issuing RFPs all the time for consultants on larger projects. This would be very similar to that. It's just that it wouldn't be for a specific project. It would be to be on a roster for future projects. So they would be evaluating pretty much the same that they're doing on a per project. And the costing would be there as well. The costing per project is a little more difficult without knowing the project. Also, we're looking at, Edward and I had some discussions, we're looking at possibly like 3 or 5 on a roster, but there may be other ones where it's specialized and there may only be one consultant on that one. And then we would just always be going to that one. On the other one, if there's 3, there's various ways they can be dealt with. It could be a rotational, it could be a best value. We could be asking for a quote from them for each project. So those are a few options that would be listed in the RFP when it's issued.
Thank you. And what happens if no one applies for that spot on a roster in a specific category? Would we just keep the same tender or RFP process?
Our expectation that there'd be lots of people that would want to be on our roster, but if there wasn't, then we would have to go back to when a project needed that type of consultant, we'd have to go out for that at that time. Or it's still, if it was under the $50,000 mark, it could be directly appointed to a consultant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Juvenville, I understand you did have a question that wasn't answered, and then Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I just thought of a question, that's why. You referenced the bid meetings. I'm just wondering if there's any accommodations if someone cannot attend a meeting, if they wanted to put a bid on something, do they have to, or will there be any kind of accommodations for them?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The expectation when we say mandatory would be that it would be a mandatory meeting. We could do some accommodations in that it could be a hybrid where it could be a online Zoom and an actual in-person to try and accommodate and capture as many people as we could.
Thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, thanks for the report. There's a lot of good stuff in it. One thing that kind of concerns me, though, is kind of a lack of council control over some of the spending, in that we would be allowing staff to make those decisions. And out of the 123 that came here, none of them were canceled, but maybe that's why, because, you know, we kind of got to look at them. So I have a concern about that. And again, 123 reports in the last 3 years, to me, doesn't really seem overwhelming, considering that we consent agenda a lot of this stuff now anyway, so it's probably not even taking up any time. I just get worried. You know, I've been sitting here for a long time, not terribly long, but I just see an erosion of council oversight, and to me, that's, problematic. I think when you're talking with that kind of numbers, those kind of bucks, maybe we should see it, and, you know, and then we kind of wear it. Like, if we spend the money, we spend it. But if it doesn't come here, it's public, but I don't think, and I sure to God hope most of the public doesn't read all this stuff, so I don't think the public, like, this is the public forum. This is where people see this stuff, and we're throwing around that kind of money. I think we should take the time. You know, we're all paid pretty handsomely to sit here. And, you know, we find a good way to sit here all night anyway, so why not, you know, read these things. So anyway, that's just my comments. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen?
Yes.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. Oh, sorry, I have the last one up. My apologies. We're still waiting for
See what I
one
mean?
more. There we go. Now all votes are in. Motion passes 15-1.
Item 18, Chief Administrative Office.
Okay, 18A, 2023 Special Events Update.
Councillor Harrigan, you had a question.
Great, thank you, Mayor Caniff. Through you to the CAO, or perhaps Audrey, I just wanted to thank you for this update and then call attention to a recent email that was distributed across the community around some engagement around special events. So I'm wondering, Audrey, if you might be able to take some time to share information about that engagement session so that we can encourage the movers and shakers of our community to attend and give their feedback.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Harrigan, for the question, of course, for the opportunity to shine a light on special events and what we're doing in that area since it moved over to Community Culture and Connections back in May. So as you point out, we do have a series of special event sessions coming up in the community. The intent is really to engage with special event organisers. And when we speak about special events in this context, we're specifically speaking about events that occur on municipally owned property, so parks, arenas, roadways. Great opportunity to come out to those events to meet with the team, and I have a colleague with me tonight, Andrea McCullough, who has spoken with most of the event organisers in our community since she started in her position in May. Opportunity to come out and meet the team. So 4 events are planned at this point in time. 2 are in person and 2 are virtual. November 29th, we kick off at 5 p.m. with a virtual event. December 7th, we have 2 events. One is virtual and one is being hosted at the Chatham-Kent Public Library in the evening. And then on December 13th, we have an event in person at the Dresden Arena as well. So ultimately, an opportunity to come and meet the team to learn about some of the special event enhancements, processes, and some of the opportunities then for event organisers to provide feedback to us as well. It is a two-way street there in terms of what we're trying to do.
Wonderful. I look forward to seeing what comes out of the work that your team has been doing, and certainly want to just give kudos to people who are putting on the events, because there's a lot of manpower and female power behind a lot of the great events across our communities in CK, and it's really a season right now in December where we see a lot of those events come to fruition in the holidays. So thank you so much for that.
On to the next item.
18C, motion of Councillor Jubenville regarding water wells along Hydro 1 St. Clair transmission line.
Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor. I brought the motion forward because we are all well aware of the history of the water wells and aquifer issues in Ward 4 North Kent. I just want to be proactive in the potential of future issues that could occur to the integrity of the wells along the transmission line corridor. Many families in North Kent have already lost their wells, and the possibility of it happening again is frightening to many of these families. Every one of us deserves access to clean water for all personal and household uses. I noted that there is no specific reference to water wells in the North Kent, or in North Kent, in the draft report from Hydro One. But they do specify other items like farmers' lands and tiles, drains, but they do not reference water wells. I'm sure as a good corporate partner and steward of our natural environment, Hydro One would be more than happy to work with Chatham-Kent in assuring its residents will have access to clean water. Thank you.
Councilor McGrail, can I get you to second that?
I will, with an amendment. So if we can move this forward a little bit, because it's to the end what we're, for our ask on the motion, or is this the whole?
I think that's it.
Okay, so I'd like to amend that we send a letter to Hydro One, asking them for more information on how they intend to address the potential impact of the integrity of the water wells from their projects. If that's okay.
Councilor Juvin, is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I would consider that
Perfect.
friendly.
Okay.
And then we're going to omit, right now, the testing part of the motion. Of the original motion.
Councilor McGrail, can I just get you to repeat that one more time so we get that right?
Yes. Yep. I wrote it down.
Do you have it electronically or no?
No, we just made it up here. Yep. Yep. I just need the paper back. I got it. Thank you.
So yes, please. So while we're doing that, can you just speak at a high level of what your intent is again, so we all understand? Which portion are you removing and what are you inserting with?
So I believe we're omitting, and further that the letter sent to Hydro One asked Hydro One to support. So we're not gonna ask Hydro One to support, we're gonna ask Hydro One for more information on proposed projects. I don't have my letter here. On the proposed projects going forward and how they may address potential issues with water wells, with the integrity of existing water wells.
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful if we can see it on the screen so we can just
Absolutely.
maybe take a 1 minute
Yep.
entertainment break. I don't know. Anybody want to sing or? Yes, you may. You're the clerk.
Thank you. Councilor Jubenville, so this doesn't change the intent of yours and it's a friendly amendment? It's not?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what Councillor McGrail is doing is just asking to remove the specific instructions that I was asking and make it more general. I think that's
Just want to make sure it's not contradicting.
what her intent is. And in light of being reminded of our agreement, I think this might be a better approach.
Great, thank you.
Councilor McGrail, that's what you're looking for? And
I'm good.
Councilor Juvenville, that's good with you?
Yes, I
Okay,
mean,
perfect.
is that just an add-on to mine, removing these specific,
No, that's the new motion right there.
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I think it should say projects, not project. From their projects.
So pluralize the project at the last word, okay?
Yes, because I believe there's 5 projects.
Okay, Councilor B. McGregor, and then Councilor Bondi.
Yeah, thank you. I had listed to pull this item, just with some general concerns around the impact of the motion, but with Councilor McGrail's amendments, I think it satisfies that need to just get some more information back and send off that request to work with Hydro One.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Camp. Like, the old motion's not there anymore, but did the initial motion, I don't want to use the word demand, but obligate Hydro One to test the water before, during, and after? And now not, right? Okay, so these are close enough to one another? They don't even really seem like they're the same thing. This is just a letter, which they'll get. But if, Judy, if you say so. It seems to me starkly different, more than an amendment. But seems to lose its teeth in my mind. But hey, if you're okay with it, Councillor Jumeville, then all right. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just wanted to note, I like this motion. It's great. Just wanted to note too that we did receive, council received a deputation from Hydro One from Mr. Leviton, who mentioned in the letter, in the written deputation, I guess, that they're working with well owners in the area already, and I think they have another meeting coming up as well, which is just wanted to make note of that. You know, they're already connecting with the community members that are impacted by this. So, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that letter for the people that didn't see it at home, they've committed to no pile driving, not touching the aquifer, and there's a third point which I don't recall off the top of my head, but those are points that they're looking at, and to have further meetings with groups that to look at the best solution possible. All right, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor C. McGregor
Yes.
and Councillor Allen.
Yes.
Have you voted? All votes are in and motion passes 16-0.
Item 19, Development Services.
19A, Wheatley Task Force Funding, Province of Ontario.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Harrigan, can I get you on the floor, please?
Happy to do that.
Happy to second.
Councillor Anderson, the floor is yours, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to take the opportunity to express thanks to the province for their funding for the Wheatley Task Force, and also to Stuart and Bruce and their team for advocating in the execution of this funding, and really getting the posting going to hire someone. And then just to further, show my thanks to the Wheatley Task Force themselves, and their dedication and their patience that they've had throughout this entire process.
Councillor Harrigan.
Sorry. So thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to express thanks, and that I really look forward to this opportunity and what we can accomplish in 2 years.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Just echoing Councillor Anderson's thanks. I did have a question about the timing. So if this motion is approved, there's a noting about the staff member being hired for 2 years. About how long might it take to get that staff member in place?
And thank you, Mayor Caniff. Well, we have the job description essentially ready to go, so we were just waiting to get the formal direction from council. We'll get that out. Given the timing now, if we get it out in the next couple of weeks, we'll probably let it ride through the holidays, because I tend to find sometimes people are out job searching, through the holidays, and, come back in early, hopefully, early new year, we'll have somebody in place, if depending on the candidates that submit.
Fabulous, very exciting.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, through the mayor. And I'm just curious, with this, if this passes, is there a possibility that we have somebody from economic development that has been very involved in this, that might be the normal person to transition? And would that mean we would hire maybe somebody in another area through this, or is it going to be a separate hire? I'm just thinking, because I know we have people from our rec dev department that have been very involved in this process over the last year or so.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
It will be posted both internally and externally.
Externally, I don't know that an internal candidate would necessarily, have that interest, but I guess we'll find out through the posting process. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Counselor Allen
Yes.
and Counselor C. McGregor.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 19C, motion by Counselor Jubenville regarding Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole.
Counselor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a little background information. A couple of constituents did reach out to me that viewed the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole on our municipal website. So they approached me, asked me what the committee was for and what we are actively doing on it. So I didn't know, being a new counselor. I reached out to administration. They basically told me that the committee was put in place to develop the natural heritage strategy, and that work has been done. And this committee is no longer needed at this specific time. And if there is a time that it is needed again, that it can be brought forward and reconstructed right away if that was the case. So I just felt that having it on the website is disingenuous to our constituents, thinking that we have a committee that we are actively working on that we're not really working on. So I thought we should remove it, and if the time comes that we need to approach it again, that we can easily do so. Thank you.
Can I get a seconder for that? Counselor Bondi. Okay, I've got some other speakers, Counselor Harrigan, Counselor Scotchy, and Counselor Pinsino. So Counselor Harrigan.
Great, thank you. My comments are just quite quick, I think, about the Natural Heritage Committee as a whole. Environmental sustainability and specifically natural heritage is one of our priority items as a council for 2022 to 2026. So I wanted to call that to our attention and note that rather than removing this committee or committee of the whole, perhaps it's better for us to hold a meeting and revisit it and identify how many times we'd like this committee of the whole to meet to identify and look at our progress towards these council priorities. So I do really appreciate Councillor Jubenville's comments, though, that we need to make sure that our website is up to date. We need to make sure that membership is up to date, that the current council is reflected on our website so that we don't create confusion. And certainly we can ask staff to do that. However, I do not think that the COTW should be dissolved at this time.
Counselor Scotchy, followed by Counselor Pinsino.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think Councillor Harrigan checked off most of my comments, and having some other conversations with councillors. I'm sure that there's some topics that will be discussed in the future that this would be very helpful to have in place. Just one question that I just want to ask and open to, because I did ask the clerk through email, because it was asked to me several times. A similar sub-motion was already presented about the consideration. You did provide a response to me. I know several other councillors had inquired as well, but two public people inquired on how the motion differs to vote on what we already voted on in the past. So I thought it was important for transparency to ask that publicly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple weeks ago, Councillor Doyle had a motion on the floor, and Councillor Jubenville added that when the report comes back, for administration to comment the need for the Natural Heritage Committee. And so that was asking for a report and for it to be addressed here. That motion failed, and now she's simply coming back and just asking to dissolve it. So I consider those two separate motions.
Thank you.
Counselor Pinsino, followed by Counselor Anderson.
Thank you, Worship. I believe the Heritage Committee should stay in place, and not only that, I think we should enhance it. Granted, it is a committee that's not used very often, but it's been around since 2014, and I believe it has worked. It's easier to keep it in place right now than it is to try to reinstate it later, I think. The tree issue is something that council's been divided on for a lot of years now, and at least by having this in place, and as Councillor Harrigan said, throughout the year we can meet when issues arise, and I just think it should be there, and I think we should enhance it even. But yes, I agree with what she said as well, where we need to get the website up to date and actually plan for some meetings. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson? Sorry, just to clarify, you moved your motion, correct? I more of assumed versus you saying, yes,
Yes.
okay,
Yes, I moved
just to
it.
clarify. All right, Councillor Bondi seconded. Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo everything that has been said. I guess my question's more about like the process of if we were to dissolve this as a whole and we did want to reinstate it, what goes into that process?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we have committees of council, we have terms of reference of which each committee and their purpose and what the membership, et cetera, is. And so if we were to dissolve today and we wanted to reinstate that, there would be a report back to council with new terms of reference, the same terms of reference, just depends what council would want that committee to do. And then it would bring forward for approval by council. And you may treat it the same as it was. You might change membership. You might change what their responsibilities are, but it would come back to council for approval before a new committee would be in place if we dissolve today.
Okay, thank you. I guess my position on this is that if it's about transparency, which I can certainly agree with, then I think just updating the website to say at this time, we're not meeting, but then keeping it as a committee of council, so whenever we are ready to do it, it's ready to go, is probably the best utilization of our resources and time. So while I can agree that if it's not currently being used and we aren't having meetings, then that just simply needs to be updated on the website. But I think that we should have it there as needed. And we should probably start using it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the website has been updated. So when Councillor Jubenville brought it to our attention a month ago, Meredith did update all of the information, so everybody's name is on there as a committee of the whole. It is currently a committee that is in place, so as all other committees, it is active because you have not dissolved it, and so therefore it is there. We would put any agendas or minutes of any committees that are meeting, and so it would be obvious to the public that there hasn't been any meetings being held this year so far, so.
Councillor Bondi and then Councillor Jubenville for any final comments.
Thank you, Mayor Canfield. Do we know when the last time this committee met?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, on the website, it shows Monday, March 21st was the last agenda, 2022. March 21st, 2022 was the last one that's posted on the website.
Okay, yeah, I don't recall it, because these are not council meetings, just to be clear, right? They're committee meetings.
That's correct. You meet as a committee of the whole, similar to what you do for budget for planning.
Right, okay. I don't want to belabor this thing, but do you recall why we met in this? I don't remember this. Oh, yeah, it was about the tree. So, yeah, we should call this the Committee of the Trees, but well, that's all we ever use it for. Anyway, I just thought this was a good housekeeping idea, but, you know, if it has met in the last couple of years, I thought it was maybe like 8 years or something. Clearly, I'm not really tuned into this thing, but, yeah, okay, I'm surprised that we've used it. So if it's being updated, I guess, you know, I seconded the motion, but I guess if it doesn't hurt anything to keep it alive, and it has been used the last couple of years, but it's been updated, so I think mission accomplished. So, okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Jubenville, final thoughts.
I don't want anyone to think that I am not for natural heritage. I just was doing this as a housekeeping item because the committee has not, since I've been on council, which is a year, we have not had any discussions or meetings, and I'm all for it if we do reignite it. I was just trying to avoid some confusion from constituents. So if somebody has the intentions of revitalizing this committee, I am all for that, but I hope that whoever has stated that they want to revitalize it puts their words into action and actually does it so that I don't look like a fool. And yeah, so we can vote on this, and if someone has further intentions of revitalizing this committee, I will support that as well. So we can, or perhaps maybe I should revoke this if somebody has intentions of revitalizing this. Can I do that?
Yes, you can. I think Bruce wanted to say something.
Okay,
I do want to cut him out, then I'll go back to you if you want
Okay.
to pull
okay,
it back.
sure, okay.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Maybe just to, a little bit of background, because it has been a couple of years on this and there's some new counselors. So, the committee of the whole came out of, the recommendation in August of 21 to start meeting on the issue based on feedback that was, made from the various surveys around the tree cutting issue and other natural heritage aspects that should be reviewed. So the idea was that, I think that's part of the confusion why it is all of council. It is a less formal format that, and given the amount of time that's being spent at regular council meetings, there's an opportunity to hear presentations, a little less formal setting through a committee of the whole. So there was about 4 or 5 meetings subsequently from September, I think, to March. And it was at that point in time where council directed us to do an RFP. The RFP at that point came back. There was no submissions received. It was 3 months before the election, and then council directed us just to suspend the work of the committee. So subsequently, last December, we did come back with a report to council, just saying here's an update. It was an information report. We didn't receive any further direction, so that's why there's never been any meetings. And then subsequently, there was the motion to remove the temporary clear-cut bylaw. And subsequently, we've not received any further direction. So ultimately, if we do want to, move forward with the committee meetings, probably the first step is it would have to take a look and revise the terms of reference so administration knows what council would like to meet as a committee. Or we just do business in a regular council. That's the other option, right? If we don't have to meet as a committee of the whole. It was really, we're spending 2 or 3 hours a night on these meetings, right? So it was an opportunity to deal with this issue in a different format. So. Mm-hmm.
So Councillor, I see you want to make a comment. However, if Councillor Juvenville is just going to pull it off the floor, we won't prolong the discussion. Is that okay? Is there something relevant to this?
Yeah, well, just to add to it, if I may, Mayor
Please
Cannon,
go ahead.
Just to add clarity, I know when I was the chair of this committee last term and was appointed the chair of this when we first started this term as well. And the intention, my intention was to wait until we approved our strategic plan in order to begin the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole discussions again. And we approved that strategic plan, and consequently, we also approved a motion to remove the temporary bylaw that was in place that I felt, and I expressed this at council when that came up. I felt that it was critical to safely have those conversations. So I was intending to, touch base with staff, Bruce and his team to get these meetings started, but kind of halted that after that discussion. So from my perspective, I think it's kind of got to change my approach as the chair of it and how to look at how to move forward with it. But I think it's a council-driven committee. It's all of us that drives it. So just wanted to add that context. Thanks.
Councillor Juvenville, you have 2 choices. Pull it off the floor, and Councillor Bondi, if he accepts that, we're done, or we can just put it to vote. Your choice.
With everything that my fellow councillors have brought forward, I would like to pull it off the floor.
Councillor Bondi, you good with that?
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
If so, it's pulled off. We'll go to the next item. Item 20, Infrastructure and Engineering Services.
20A, lease agreement with Chatham Minor Baseball Association.
Councillor Juvenville and Councillor Doyle, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
I so move.
I will second that.
Councillor Juvenville, back to you again.
Just a minute, I gotta find it. What number is it? 20A, sorry.
Yep.
Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. It's long stuff. Can I use
Page 128.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple questions regarding, could we confirm that the canteen will be accessible to any users of the field? And also, I just want to confirm that the allocation of all the users of the diamonds will be facilitated in a way that it will be fair and equitable to all user groups in Chatham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rob Pollock, Director of Parks, Fleet, and Facilities. So yes, our booking allocation for our field use, we'll look at all of our requests that we get from all our user groups in Chatham-Kent. Our staff meet as a team and we discuss where those users will play in all of Chatham-Kent based on a number of various variables, such as if it's a tournament, if it's a local group, if it's minor, if it's senior, if it's a junior team, other things like that. And then we put that out as a group. So yes, we look at it as an equitable way and similar to our ice allocation. And then the other question about the canteen, yes, so if someone wants to operate the canteen, they would have to do that for all of our user groups that are using that facility. Similar to our arenas, we're not always open at practices, but for games and tournaments, other large events, we require them to be open. We have different relationships. We operate them at the arenas. We have community living that operates one of our canteens at a soccer facility. So in this as well, it would be required that whoever's operating it, if it's CMBA or another group, they would have to be open for all our user groups using that facility for the games and tournaments and large events.
Thank you.
Robert, just to clarify on what you just said, you're following a policy that you have when you're doing the allocations, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Their
All right.
field allocation policy. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just have two questions. One of the things in here says about them doing the addition to building 4. So to add changing facilities, washroom, showers, and a coach's room for use of the CMBA, a guest team, and potentially the IBL team. So I was just hoping when you're doing the contract with them, I don't know if that has to be done now or not, if we change the wording there. I know we're looking for probably a better change room for the IBL league to use than the Memorial Arena. So would you be able to make that part of the contract where it says that that new change room would be able to be used by the IBL league as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, our intent and our process so far, we've been in discussions with IBL along with CMBA, and it's more of a joint relationship that we've had. And both CMBA and IBL noticed that this would be a significant improvement to both of their operations. So we can make that adjustment, and both parties were already in assumption that both would get to use those change rooms, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then just second question. I see we're getting into another 10-year lease with CMBA, and I'm guessing part of that would also be because they're going to be doing the addition to the field house. So as well, just to protect our municipality from getting into a long-term contract with them and nothing being done, would you also be able to put somewhere in the contract where if the building is not built within, say, a 3-year period, then we reevaluate the contract itself?
So in most of our legal agreements, we do put in stuff similar to that context about capital improvements. Obviously, when we're dealing with community groups, sometimes they have to fundraise or get grants or get some other sponsorships as well. So the timelines for them, they might differ. They could go from, like, if they started construction tomorrow, it might take them a year, it might take them 2 or 3, depending on what they're looking at doing. So we could have certain legal items in there about that they have to have it done at a certain time, or we'd bring something back to council. But yeah, when we're dealing with community groups, sometimes they do need a bit more time to get these capital improvements done.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. It's just hopefully if we're looking for change rooms for the IBL league, that starts next year. So ideally, we can get on this sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen?
Yes.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. Moving on to 20B, Municipal Cemetery Burials for People of Muslim Faith.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Very much appreciate the information report coming forward. So I had a few questions for Robert and did want to just note there's a number of members of the Chatham Muslim community here tonight with some interest in this this item, and really did want to thank them for bringing forward some of the concerns. I know it was quite a while ago that Ike had reached out and you know, really looking to represent a community that's very much growing in Chatham-Kent, and I think it's really important that we're doing our best to fill needs and gaps in our community and looking at ways we can support growing cultural communities here in Chatham-Kent. So I know this is likely for a lot of us the first time that we've seen this request come forward, and we're just starting to understand where that request is coming from. So maybe to you, Rob, can you overview the process that's gone on to this point? So was it just sort of one initial meeting, and what type of work has been done to gather some information regarding the request?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so we had the community group reach out. We also had yourself reach out. So we set up a meeting with the group to understand exactly what needs they were looking for, what they were requesting from us. And we usually do this for any community group that reaches out on any of our subjects. And we try to use our expertise and our knowledge to kind of lead them in the right way, if it's with our services or if it's in the private sector. So we met with them to really understand what they needed, and then we thought it's a great opportunity to put this in front of council so you understand the request that was coming from the community.
Great, and just maybe to overview the report, what types of you know, changes or challenges or gaps were they identifying, and where do you see the challenges in some of that provision?
So some of the changes that they're looking at were specifically for the group that came forward was they wanted a specific area just for individuals of their faith to be buried there. They also wanted it to be put into a section and not paid in advance like other groups that we get. We have certain groups that will purchase between 10 and 30 lots at a time, but they purchase them up front. And this group was more looking for us to set aside and make some changes to our bylaw. So there's changes in how the plots might be formatted, and then they would pay when the plots were used instead of when they would be requesting them or paying for them at the beginning like other groups. There's also some requests on could we do burials quicker because of their faith. Right now we kind of operate on a model where we take 2 to 3 business days based on operational needs to set things up with staff and it work out everything so it's a smooth operation. So there would be all those implications as well if we move forward with this request that came forward.
Right, and then looking at sort of the landscape in Ontario, can you maybe comment on how some other communities are you know, identifying or meeting some of those needs in different ways?
Yeah, so some communities have went forward with a similar request like this through a municipality or a city or a local government. But most of these requests by faith-based community groups are operated in the private sector. So a private cemetery or the group themselves would purchase land, get it authorized as a cemetery through the Braidman Authority of Ontario, and then do it themselves or through a private organization. So there's those options as well.
Right, thank you, and certainly appreciate the detail in the report. I know from being around here for a while, I certainly have learned a lot about cemeteries, and there's some challenges in management and, you know, the differences in some of the traditional cemeteries we have and private cemeteries and municipal cemeteries. So I definitely think the report provides some initial preliminary information to continue to engage and look at what some of the real solutions could be. So I know that it's a report just for information and respect. There's a few options in there that, you know, in the future we can look at. And I think in reading that report, speaking to the community, I think there's some opportunity for some more meeting and really identifying if there are some other solutions that we can partner with and what the best path forward is. Because we know that the needs going to continue to change. We know that our resources change and our capacity changes. So I know this is likely not the last time we're going to talk about this, and I'm confident that we can continue to engage and look for some solutions in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Rob, I read, so this is just for information, so if you guys make a decision, do you come back to us? Is that a council thing, or do you guys just make the decision? I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, we would be coming back to council because we'd be making changes to the cemetery's bylaw and possibly our fees and other items. So we would bring it all back to council if we made any changes.
Okay, great. And just a question. Like I read in the report, and of course I've been in the cemetery, and I'll be back one day. Boy, everybody getting a little tired. That was an easy one. But back to my question. By default, the cemeteries are, Catholic or Anglican. And I think that's sort of a historical thing rather than probably a determination at the time, just based on immigration 200 years ago. And I've been through the cemetery, and I do know there's like the veterans section. Probably that's not the right label, but in any event, I think you know where I am there. Is there like a Jewish section or a Hindu section? Or is there any other denomination that has like an area? And frankly, I'm not trying to be smart. I really don't know. I've only been to Maple Leaf Cemetery. That's the only one I've ever been into. So I think you did say this was the first request, but again, by default, because I know there was a lot of, there was a large Jewish community in Chatham years and years ago. Is there any other example of this?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the past, not in the recent past, long time ago, there would have been cases where certain religions had certain areas of certain cemeteries, and that's shown if you walk through some of our cemeteries. But that practice by municipalities really doesn't exist in the industry standard anymore. So when someone's looking to buy a plot, you can buy a plot for yourself, for your family. You can buy them in like 1, 2, 8. And then we also give options, for your example, if you say veterans, we have groups that come forward and say, we want, 20 plots in a row. So we have all our veterans in a row. We also have an organization where when nuns are buried, they all go in a certain.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah.
But what happens is we sell them about 10 to 30 plots, and then we sell the plots right next to them. So the difference now is we would be designating a certain area of a cemetery specifically for a certain faith, where right now we do allow certain groups to purchase 10 to 30, but then right next to them someone else would be buried, and then once they're sold, then they would purchase another 10 or 30. So they're buying them periodically as they need. It's not that we're reserving like 300 at a time or a certain amount. It's just, and they pay for that up front. So they want 20, they pay for 20 up front, and then they use them, and then they get another 20.
Right, and this group would have the opportunity to do that as well, I'm sure, right? Like buy a.
Yeah.
And if you do that, how do you determine how much space you do? Well, I guess if they're buying them, then that's up to them, right? Because it's kind of hard to predict in 30 years how many, well, frankly, veterans, right? Like we don't know what the future holds. So how would you determine like how much space?
So
this is the next report, right? Yeah. This is what you're getting.
So we base it on a lot of factors, but we also have limited space in some of our cemeteries. So we want to make sure that everyone has access, so it's inclusive to everyone. So based on how many burials they've historically had in Chatham-Kent, we'll base on how many they get at that time. So if they've averaged about 4 and they want to buy 20, they'll go through that in about 5 years. So that's an acceptable amount. So we based it on how many burials they'll probably have, also about other requests that we're having at the time. So
right, so like an educated projection kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, great, that clears up. Thanks, Rob.
Councillor Harrigan?
Great, thank you for the information. Thank you, Councillor McGregor, for pulling it so that we can have this conversation. Just in follow-up, are groups able to resell plots? So for example, if a community group were to fundraise or to raise money to purchase a large number of plots, could they put those plots in trust to a particular group or family, or in this case with this group, like a Muslim community organization, and then resell or reallocate those plots
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. They can transfer the lot. They cannot sell that lot or transfer it for an amount more than what was purchased for. So they can't make a profit off of that through one of our municipal cemeteries.
Okay, great, because I noticed on page 3, there was potential next steps that you're noting required council direction. And so I think further conversation without council direction around creative approaches for how community goals can be achieved, like kind of the purchasing and reallocating, can happen with staff. But then some of the operational changes, and certainly I'm not privy to them, but I do think it's really important that our community members' cultural practices be respected and accommodated as much as possible. So I would like to see more information about that to come back, and I'm not sure if I need a motion for that just because it's in this bullet around council direction, or perhaps if it can just be an informal request that could be sent out. And it's around the operational changes and associated resources to accommodate processes and procedures that may not currently align with traditional Muslim burial practices.
So in the report, we actually address our next steps. And I know you mentioned a motion, but in those next steps, we address exactly what we would have to do. And that involves meeting with them, discussing any bylaw changes that we'd have to do, discussing any operational changes, any legal implications. So we're already saying that we're going to go back and get that information, and then we could present that as well back to you.
Perfect, thank you. I misread then the report. Thank you, no problem.
Yep.
Just want to add a couple things myself, just as far as we're a growing community and welcoming community. And we're going to be more and more multicultural as we move forward. And this is real important that we adapt to these things. I'll use the Diwali fireworks, for instance, something we didn't have in place before, but we put in place to respect the culture. And this is, again, something that I think this is probably not be the last thing we have to do as we expand forward. It's a good thing. So I just encourage the next steps to work something. I'm sure that there's a solution that will work for both the municipality and for the Muslim groups to get something happen. So I encourage that. And it's just for information, so we don't need to vote.
20C, Civic Center water damage.
Councillor Story had a question about this information report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Tom Skodak for this report, and I appreciate this update. Just a question or two and a comment for Edward. I think it's important to have this detail on the specific building in front of us, particularly because of the unique context that we're facing with this particular building. And in that, namely, the future of this specific location is currently being discussed. A decision has not yet been made, but if it does move 3 blocks, also downtown, to an equally aging building, this one of unknown condition, regardless, that will still be several years down the road. So I just wanted to confirm with Edward that have we updated or adapted any of our routine maintenance to monitor this type of concern a little more closely? I know we're observing things like drain pipes to make sure that they're clear in the event of heavy rainfall, for example, which I think was the cause of this particular damage. It seems with our more extreme weather, it's likely this could happen more frequently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. In terms of this building, we did undertake, as part of this process, a building condition assessment. And that building condition assessment really did identify the needs of the building in terms of the mechanical systems, the HVAC, the drains itself, and it did identify a number of short-term improvements. I believe in the report we speak to developing an action plan to deal with those life safety issues that we identified through the plan itself. The root cause of the flooding really was a broken pipe that was in the ceiling, and that pipe, was under pressure during a large summer heavy rainstorm, and unfortunately, it's not something that we have line of sight to. Those pipes are in the walls. Those pipes are above the ceiling. It's not something that we can, inspect on a regular basis. So the pipe broke because it was aging and it needs to be replaced. So we've had a number of those issues over the years. So we do our best in terms of maintaining the building as it exists today with the existing infrastructure that we have. We do ensure that the drain pipes are cleared out before, on a regular basis. But in terms of can we prevent that event from occurring again, the answer is no. This building is aging and it has a number of parts of it that are failing, and particularly the pipe system that's here, the HVAC, and all those other things that were identified in the report. So we do our best to monitor, but in terms of saying, can I guarantee council that that won't happen again in this building? I can't say that. This building has a number of needs in terms of rehabilitation.
Thank you. I didn't ask if you could guarantee it would never happen again, because I know that's an unreasonable request. I was just wondering about the ongoing maintenance, and I appreciate the slight change in approach with this council to ensure that modern repairs can be done. If we do end up selling this public asset on the market, is it in our best interest to maintain it efficiently until then?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. In terms of that question, this building would have a reuse value of some sort for whatever potential redevelopment could be. So the better the condition of this building, obviously the higher value that we could get on this building in the open market.
Thank you. I just want to add that there's been a lot of discussion about the condition of this facility, and unfortunately, we can't change what happened in the past or why previous decisions were made the way they were the last 2 decades. And I think letting any public facility, whether it's our civic center, our city hall, or anything else we are responsible for, to deteriorate in this way is inexcusable. And as a council, we should be ensuring this public asset, which is owned by public residents, by our taxpayers, is being maintained properly. And whether we use this important and architecturally significant building for the next few years, or the next 40 years, which in a previous report to council recently indicated that with proper repairs, this facility could be used for at least that long. As council, we really should expect that facilities are maintained on behalf of our residents, and we should support administration in these efforts because I know they're trying. And based on the number of responses that I have received from the public, they're expecting better from us as well, for the health and safety of the staff that work here, to ensure proper access for residents and visitors to the facility, and treating public assets responsibly like we would any other facility. This is the seat of our government. This is where the most important decisions are made that affect our citizens today and in the future, and I think it should be treated as such. So thank you again to Tom Skodak and his team, and I look forward to additional updates on this as it moves forward. Thank you, Mayor Ganna.
Next item.
20E, Waste Collection Contract 2024 Amendment. We had a conflict of interest by Councillor Wright.
Councillor Bondi and Councillor Anderson, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Certainly, Mayor Caniff.
And I'm happy to second.
See no questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Allen
Yes.
and Councillor C. McGregor.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0. 20F, Hours of Operation for Off-Road Vehicles.
This is an information report, Councillor McGrail, and then over to Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I would like to put a motion forward to send this report back to administration and have them create or update bylaw that includes allowing these vehicles to run from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Daily. If I can get a seconder.
Councillor Pincinel.
Perfect. Well, I do appreciate this report, and I understand, what I'm asking for. But what I didn't see in this report was a couple of things. And number one was, and I've learned this as I had put this forward and come to talk to different residents within Chatham-Kent, that for some people, this is their mode of transportation. Okay, legally, getting to and from work. Chatham-Kent is a rural community, and we're proud to have rural businesses. call CK their home. So there is that allowance through our approved roadways for people to be using these machines to get to and from work. So we haven't addressed that. Number two is the tourism part. We have the Kingsman Club, we have the Sertoma clubs, and we have local individuals that have raised tens of thousands of dollars, for our communities. Not to mention that when they have these events, where people from across southwestern Ontario are coming and visiting Chatham-Kent and patronizing these businesses. So that is a big part of this too. And we need to recognize, the positive impacts that side-by-sides and ATVs do contribute to Chatham-Kent. And that the option, this gives still an option for safe transportation for those that only have this option. And I'm going to stop there for right now, and I'll let Councillor Pinsino take it from here.
Councillor Pinsino?
Thank you, Worship. I brought the original motion forward to this, and because of the unknown, back then it was all doom and gloom, and we actually give this 5 years, and I dare say there's more ATVs in Chatham-Kent now than there's motorcycles due to the fact that after the bylaw come in, it just exploded. Everybody got one. Almost every rural household has an ATV. It's a mode of transportation in the rural areas. Service clubs, as Councillor McGrail said, use this as a fundraising tool, and it's been good. When they do their fall tour, anybody that rides their ATV, say to Thamesville from Wallaceburg, they have to scamper to get home because our days get so short in the fall. And honestly, this is a natural progression to go to set hours. They all have lights. They all have the safety equipment. They got to be insured. You got to have a driver's license. You got to wear a helmet. And I bet if you run the safety stats against the ones for motorcycles, I bet there isn't much difference. And yet I believe there's more ATVs out there. I'm going to support this. I think it's the right thing to do now. We need to move to the next step. And like I said, we've been collecting data for 5 years now, and I think it's just time to move. Thank you.
Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I agree with Jamie that time needs to be extended, and the four-wheelers are well used. But one problem we have in the East Kent is the four-wheelers are on the walking trails and our trees parks. And I had talked to Dave Taylor about this, and he was going to have me bring a motion forward before this happened that we increase our signage on our trails to keep the four-wheelers off, and possibly increasing our fines, and that to be in the report too, if that's good with Jamie.
Absolutely.
I'm good with that too, Your Worship.
All right. Councillor Anderson?
Councillor Wright just took the words out of my mouth. Thank you.
If there's any final words, Councillor McGrail?
Yeah, just a quick one is that in the report, our neighbors to the north have extended their times, and I think it's just we're part of that, and we should move forward too. So, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Yes.
And Councillor Allen?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
We'll go on to notice of motion. Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and I appreciate everyone's patience. This motion is a longer one than usual, but I think it needs to be extended in this way so it provides some important context. I will be bringing this motion forward at the next council meeting, whereas the jury that heard that Carol Culleton Anastasia Kuzik and Natalie Warmerdon inquest, the Renfrew County inquest regarding domestic violence, issued 86 recommendations to prevent future deaths and delivered those recommendations to the province of Ontario on intimate partner violence. And whereas recommendation number 1 of the inquest is for the province of Ontario to formally declare intimate partner violence an epidemic, and whereas every 6 days in Canada, a woman is killed by her intimate partner, and whereas this past year in Ontario, 52 women, or 1 per week, were victims of femicide, and whereas gender and sexually diverse Indigenous individuals are particularly at risk, being 5 times more likely than non-Indigenous gender and sexually diverse individuals to experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And whereas in the municipality of Chatham-Kent in 2022, there were 1,788 intimate partner violence calls for service made to the Chatham-Kent Police Service. And whereas according to Statistics Canada, 80% of intimate partner violence goes unreported, whereas violence against women costs the national justice system, healthcare systems, social service agencies, and municipalities nearly $10 billion per year, and municipalities are on the front lines in addressing gender-based violence, whereas over 70 municipalities and regions across Ontario have already declared a gender-based violence and/or intimate partner violence epidemic. And whereas on August 20th, 2023, Ontario big city mayors and mayors and regional chairs of Ontario passed a motion declaring intimate partner violence and gender-based violence an epidemic, called on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and all municipalities and regions in Ontario and Canada to do the same, and called for changes to the criminal code, whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent Council recognizes that issues of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence are matters of local importance, including public health, EMS, community services, and community safety. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Chatham-Kent declare an epidemic in intimate partner violence and gender-based violence in accordance with recommendation number 1 of the Renfrew County Inquest. Number 2, the city requests the Police Service Board to integrate intimate partner violence into the Police Services Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan in accordance with recommendation number 10 of the Renfrew County Inquest. Number 3, that Mayor Caniff be requested to write a letter to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, requesting that the Province of Ontario reconsider their previous decision and declare intimate partner violence and gender-based violence as an epidemic, and act on all 86 recommendations from the Renfrew County Inquest by setting up a provincial implementation committee to oversee comprehensive consideration of all recommendations. And lastly, number 4, that a copy of this motion be sent to the Honourable Arif Farani, Minister of Justice, the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Charmaine Williams, Associate Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity, the Honourable Parm Gill, Minister of Red Tape Reduction, Chatham-Kent-Leamington MP Dave Epp, Lambton-Kent Middlesex MP Leanne Rood, Chatham-Kent-Leamington MP P. Trevor Jones, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, mayors and regional chairs of Ontario, and Ontario's big city mayors. Thank you for your patience.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you. I, Councillor Brock McGregor, hereby give notice I will bring forward the following motion for discussion and voting at the December 11th, 2023 Council meeting. Whereas recently it was announced that the Gardiner Expressway and Don Valley Parkway will be uploaded from the City of Toronto to the Province of Ontario, Chatham-Kent Council direct administration to identify roadways previously funded by the province and draft a letter requesting similar treatment, including an uploading of said identified roads to the Province of Ontario. Thank you.
Closed session report, Councillor McGrail, and Councillor Harrigan, if I can get you to second that one.
Thank you. Council closed session report Monday, November 20th, 2023. Council directed administration on proposed acquisition of land by the municipality with regard to land acquisition, Public Works Operations Chatham Site, Section 239 2C, Municipal Act 2001. Personal matters about identifiable individuals, labor relations, a trade secret, or scientific, technical, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group, or organization with regard to a public health unit matter. Section 239 2B D&I Municipal Act 2001, and council received information on a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on by the municipality with regard to Huron boat launch, Section 239 2K, Municipal Act 2001. And then I have council closed session report, Monday, November 27th, 2023. Council directed administration on proposed disposition of land by the municipality with regard to offer to purchase property identification number 00776 001, Town Line, Community of Pancor, Section 239 2C, Municipal Act, and proposed acquisition of land by the municipality with regard to Maple Leaf Cemetery Land Negotiation, Section 239 2C, Municipal Act 2001. So seconded.
Put it to vote.
Good Lord.
Counselor Allen
Yes.
and Counselor C. McGregor.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Next item, approval of communication items. Councillor Hall and Councillor Doyle, can I get you to move them, please?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Non-agenda business, Councillor Harrigan.
Great, thank you, Mayor Caniff. Through you, I just wanted to call attention to a recent meeting on wheels that Edward and I were able to have, where we drove out through the West Kent area and discussed a few really key infrastructure issues. One of the issues that we discussed was guardrails on Queens Line North, which neighbors a pretty large creek. And through our conversations, I learned that there may be a process that we are developing or that we have in place that would allow for us to insert guardrails for safety measures on Queens Line North. So Edward, I'm just wondering if you might be able to speak to that specific area, because it is a matter of concern for many community members.
Thank you, Mayor. Plan. And through that plan, we identified a number of road safety initiatives. That plan looked at a lot of the statistics in the past number of years and identified ways that we could potentially improve safety on our roadways. One of them really is dealing with the whole issue about providing positive guidance and protection of motorists from roadside hazards. In our upcoming budget that we'll be presenting to council tomorrow night, you'll see in the capital budget there is a new line item related to the installation of guide rails. There's always been a line item in the life cycle related to the upgrading of existing guide rails, but there is a new line item for about $400,000 on an annual basis to put in new guide rail. We are going to be coming back to council in early January, February with a list of projects that would fall underneath those categories. So will council be considering and debating the amount of money for that program? We'll be looking at identifying candidates through that staff report for guide rail, for sidewalks, and a large number of those infrastructure lists that we'll be coming back to you with. So Queens Line, Baptiste Line, those are all areas that when you look at them, there is some potential there for safety improvement and by installing those guide rails. So we'll be looking at that and coming back to council for approval.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me the time for that public conversation, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Two items. I just wanted to let council know that if you have a chance, it'll likely be in the next couple of days or relatively short time frame, but if you're able to meet with Josh Myers and the folks at Chatham Hope Housing and one of our nonprofit affordable housing providers, they just finished a deep energy retrofit of one of their homes as a pilot project, and I was fortunate to go this morning for a quick tour along with Terry Johnson, who's the vice president of Chatham Hope Housing, and Tom Groshmal, who is a general contractor with Trim Tab, who did the pilot project. And it was really remarkable because this home has now achieved almost a 50% reduction in energy costs, which goes right back into the pocket of the tenant and Hope Housing and the benefits that go along with that. So the type of work that they're doing to not only is it good for the climate, it's good financially for us. The healthier the tenants are and that our affordable nonprofit housing partners are, the healthier our community will be. So I would encourage you, if you have a chance, to pop over there for a quick tour. I would recommend it. And then on another note, I wanted to congratulate the music department of Chatham-Kent Secondary School, who presented a fantastic performance of the Addams Family that wrapped up this weekend. So kudos to all the students and teachers and volunteers who made that happen. Nothing but rave reviews. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor McGregor touched on something I was going to ask Gord in open quickly, but I do want to touch on it because I think it's extremely important. Given that recent announcement of uploading Gord, I just wanted to see, I appreciate Councillor McGregor's motion, and we'll be discussing that in detail, but just curious if there's been any release in new funds for the province, because after hearing and reading about the article today, which I sent to Mr. Dubin as well, which I'm sure he already knew about, that's huge money, and I'm just curious to see what our rural communities, if there's been a new announcement, or if this is just a one-off to one municipality.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about the City of Toronto a little bit today. So great news, great day for the City of Toronto and Mayor Chow and their taxpayers in Toronto, as the Don Valley Parkway and the Gardiner Expressway were uploaded to the province today to look after. That represents $1.3 billion, $1.2 billion of savings over the next 3 years, and many, many more billions to come for the decades after that. Also in the announcement today was several more billions for subway and light rail transit in Toronto. In exchange, Toronto committed to their housing pledge, something that we're already at, I think 300 to 400% of our target, Mayor, in Chatham-Kent, but they committed to meeting their targets and dropped their ask for a new revenue source. So great day for the City of Toronto. Not sure what that means for 443 other municipalities in Ontario yet, or their taxpayers, as obviously it's be their income tax dollars that will also be contributing to those Toronto projects. So kind of keep you in a suspense a little bit. Tomorrow night I had some opening remarks, somewhat related to a call to action of all the other municipalities in Ontario of what we should be working towards over the next few years. I think it's a call to action about having serious discussions like the City of Toronto just did and concluded with the province and the federal government on maybe less about who delivers the service, because we at the local level can best deliver many services, but who should be paying the bill for some of these services, I think is I've gotten a little bit out of hand, and I'll have much more details on what shift has happened over the last decade in the millions of dollars that's impacted Chatham-Kent taxpayers in tomorrow's presentation. So I'll keep you in suspense a little bit.
Thank you. And Mayor Kaniff, just want to also recognize that December 1st is the parade in Blenheim. So there'll be a big Santa Claus parade in Blenheim, and also the first annual, which will be a very significant event in our in the town of Blenheim for the first time. Will be Light Up the Park event at Talbot Trail Place. A lot of time and effort and funds have went into that event, and it's going to be a super awesome event for the children of the community to come in and see. And I hear that there's a special guest coming up from the north to visit as well. So thank you.
Reading of the bylaws. First and second reading, Councillor Pincinel and Councillor Bondi, can each move that, please?
So moved, Your Worship.
And seconded, Your Worship.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading, Councillor Thompson and Councillor B. McGregor.
Moved. So seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Resolution of Council, Councilman Grail and Councillor Sakachi, going to get you to wrap it up.
That Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, December 11th, 2023, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. Please note that the December 4th, 2023 council meeting has been canceled.
So moved.
Anyone opposed to adjourning at 9:02? Seeing none. As well, we're looking forward to passing my desk over to Councillor B. McGregor for the next 2 to 3 nights. So stay tuned. Thanks a lot.